I became the god of light. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction. So don't try any techniques you hear here in real life, your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 53, 3 flowers gather at the top, 5 elements return to the origin. But it's okay if you haven't seen it yet, because Master Fang is about to perform on stage, and you'll all see her martial arts demonstration. With that, the live stream shifted to the arena. Master Fang, dressed in a white training uniform, walked onto the stage, followed by several other people. It's said these people are Master Fang's disciples. They will be working with Master Fang to perform Fang's Tai Chi, so don't blink, Xiaoyu explained with a smile. Since our country developed the smallpox vaccine, there have been no more 3 flowers gathering at the top cultivators or martial artists. With the advent of Huaxiang's Hanqi water, there's naturally no more 5 Qi converging at the origin. Even with surgery, core formation elders and nascent soul elders have all suffered terribly, their years of cultivation destroyed in an instant. Only the divided soul ancestor, relying on his powerful cultivation, was merely imprisoned. Alice, truly a misfortune for our country, she sighed, pretending to wipe her eyes. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, my stomach hurts, ha ha ha. Kidney stones, pregnant woman, and schizophrenia? Xiaoyu, you're amazing. I'd call you the best at making jokes. 666, I laughed so hard I spat out my food. As soon as she finished speaking, a bunch of netizens started flooding the screen, all amused by Xiaoyu's funny tone. Alright, we've finished our jokes. Let's watch Master Fang's performance now. Xiaoyu smiled slightly. On the stage, Master Fang, dressed in white, stood in front, with 5 disciples dressed in black standing in a straight line behind her, their hands on the back of the person in front. Master Fang smiled and said to the surrounding crowd, "Next, I'll be performing hitting a cow through a mountain." She walked to the male disciple in front, raised her palm, and aimed it at his chest. At this distance, we can conduct electricity. With that, she pushed her hand towards her disciples, and an astonishing scene unfolded. Except for the 2 disciples in front, the 3 black-clad disciples behind her staggered and tumbled backward. The 3 disciples trembled violently as they rolled, like they were having an epileptic seizure. A gasp erupted from the crowd. My god, Xiaoyu was initially surprised, then her face flushed red, as if she was trying to suppress something. Amazing. A master is a master, haha. This Fang's electric shock technique means that if I accidentally press a switch, I can just conduct electricity like this and it'll be over. The person upstairs is going to make me laugh to death so they can inherit my Alipay credit. The person upstairs is awesome. Hearing the doubts from the audience, Master Fang's expression didn't change, her face remained smiling, as if she had heard praise. She called to her disciples and continued her performance. 5 disciples surrounded her in a circle. Master Fang closed her eyes, then suddenly opened them, spreading her hands. The disciples were instantly blasted away, scattered on the ground, convulsing and jumping around. Is this for real? Too exaggerated? The onlookers and those watching the live stream were all incredulous. They simply couldn't believe Tai Chi could achieve such a level. Ha ha ha, amazing. Master Fang's electric mother fist is incredible. It's hilarious. Is this move called the high voltage cable on the roadside is leaking electricity? And it's convulsing all over. If you ask me, this isn't a Tai Chi master, this is a high voltage cable that has come to life. It was the same comment from the previous guy. As soon as this comment appeared in the live stream, a whole bunch of messages immediately exploded. 666, Zor, sit tight, if I don't help you, who'll I help you up? We both went through 9 years of compulsory education, how can you be so outstanding? I laughed so hard I almost choked. Ha ha ha, upstairs, do you want to die? Be careful, Master Fang's electric mother fist might hit you through the internet. PFFT Xiaoyu was also amused by the netizens' comments and couldn't hold back anymore. However, this wasn't entirely her fault. It was mainly because Master Fang's performance was too exaggerated and lacked skill, making it seem very fake. Suyun, who was observing from the shadows, was also amazed by the master's performance. not by the martial arts, but by the sheer audacity of the performer, able to do something so unexpected in front of everyone. Most importantly, he didn't sense any energy from this person, meaning the performer was just an ordinary mortal, nothing special. These moves were truly just a performance. Haha, Master Fang, do you think we're fools? At this moment, a handsome man in his 30s with a mustache, Master Dong, suddenly stood up on the platform. He laughed loudly as he walked down. Master Fang and her disciples' faces immediately darkened. Master Dong, what are you doing? Master Lei, sitting next to Master Dong, shouted in a deep voice. What am I doing? Of course, I'm going up to let her demonstrate. I think the audience wants to see it too, right? Master Dong said with a grin to the spectators. We want to see, that's right. At this moment, all the tourists below the stage echoed, eager to see Master Dong, who specialized in exposing frauds, challenge Master Fang. Whether Master Fang had real skills or was a fraud, this time they should be able to see, and they were very much looking forward to it. Master Lei's face darkened, and the other martial arts masters on the stage also looked rather unpleasant. They really couldn't have any goodwill towards this guy who broke the rules. Thinking this, he defended Master Fang a few times. Master Fang's Tai Chi belongs to Chen-style Tai Chi, and it's true that she made her disciples Yanfei. With so many disciples, can you say they're all idiots? It's like two foreigners talking. If you can't understand them, can you say they're not speaking human language? Su Yun's lips twitched, another master with a lot of talk. What you say is useless, the truth will be revealed soon, Master Dong sneered. Soon, he walked onto the stage and stood opposite Master Fang. Come on, show me you're hitting the cow from across the mountain technique. You're not afraid, are you? He beckoned to the black-clad disciples, his face full of mockery. Master Fang's expression changed, but with so many people watching, she couldn't refuse. She glanced at her disciples, signaling them to stand properly. Soon, 5 disciples took their positions, while Master Dong stood behind the last disciple. With the performance about to begin, everyone, from the live stream viewers to tourists, was glued to the stage. Master Fang glanced at Master Dong, then suddenly frowned and said, Master Dong, you need to relax. Relax, alright, you can begin. Master Dong smiled nonchalantly. Master Fang gave the lead disciple a perfunctory push, causing the disciple to stumble back a few steps. However, Master Dong stood firmly, only taking a slight step back. This scene silenced everyone. Master Dong laughed mockingly, about to utter a few sarcastic remarks. However, Master Fang's expression darkened first, and she cautioned him, you need to relax, otherwise the force won't be transmitted. You can't do it like this. Chapter 54, The essence of Chinese culture is outdated. If you tighten it, its force is blocked, she explained earnestly, leaving the audience stunned, wanting to laugh but not daring to. After speaking, Master Fang pushed hard again. The result was that only the disciple in front moved. This time, Master Dong didn't even budge an inch. You tightened it again, Master Fang said, frowning. Ha ha ha. Upon hearing this, all the onlookers burst into laughter. Master, if you can't do it, you can't do it. Tightening it is a joke. Master Dong released his grip, saying mockingly, sure enough, all martial arts are fake. You're all just all show and no substance. Ha ha ha. Upon hearing this, the Taoist sect leaders and masters on the platform all looked very uncomfortable. Master Fang's face paled slightly, but she still forced a calm defense. This is because you're not relaxed enough, and it's also related to the fact that you haven't practiced Tai Chi. You don't have internal energy, which is why it's more effective against people with internal energy. So does that mean the best way to deal with Tai Chi is not to practice it? Master Dong laughed until his stomach hurt. He sneered, relax so your disciple can push you down. Internal energy? If there really is internal energy in this world, I think you're all liars. Come on, next one. He laughed loudly, since you failed, let's have someone else try. Master Lei, you try. He turned to another Tai Chi master who had spoken up for Master Fang earlier. The other man frowned and didn't agree. Seeing that he was rejected, Master Dong wasn't surprised. He just curled his lip in disdain and turned his gaze to Master Bao. Master Bao, your Bao 3 whip is very powerful. Come up and fight me, in front of so many people. You're not afraid, are you? Master Bao, sitting in the martial arts master's seat, looked a little ugly. Just then, the audience below the stage started to jeer. Go, Master Bao. Teach this guy a lesson, Show him the power of our traditional martial arts. Yeah, don't be a coward. Master Bao, who originally didn't want to fight, was forced onto the ring by the tourists' encouragement. A referee, seeing they were about to fight, came up from below and stood between the two. With the referee's command, the match officially began. 3, 2, 1, Renee go. The two circled each other for a moment, then Master Dong suddenly rushed forward, his right fist striking Master Bao's face hard. 1 punch, 2 punches. Master Bao didn't react in time, didn't even get into a fighting stance, and was knocked down to the ground by 2 punches. The referee quickly stopped Master Dong, and Master Bao lay on the ground for several seconds before getting up again. After getting up, the two started the second round. Master Dong laughed loudly and threw another punch at Master Bao, hitting him squarely in the head, and the opponent fell down again. In the third round, it was another 2 punches, the two novices pecking and kicking at each other. Then Master Bao was hit squarely in the face, finally collapsing to the ground like a corpse, unable to get up for a long time. Ha ha ha, this is traditional martial arts, Master Dong laughed mockingly. The audience below erupted in disappointment and boos, and the live stream viewers also began to question Master Bao's martial arts skills. Asian Dance King, Master Bao is amazing. He caught all 5 punches in his face, luckily he was wearing diapers. This Master Bao really knows martial arts. He's just here to give away experience. Exactly, he's probably just another fraud. What are you saying upstairs? Don't slander him. Master Bao used the bone-melting palm technique, and his internal energy is only slightly damaged. It's just a minor injury, he'll be fine after 3 to 5 months of rest. Moreover, although Master Bao appeared to be hit, he actually struck his opponent's face and head without them realizing it, and his opponent is in a terrible state. He's already suffered internal injuries and will undoubtedly die within 81 years. The master truly lives up to his name. He can transfer his power into his opponent's body and hide it for decades before it slowly unleashes its power. You must not underestimate him. This was also from the same guy. It's that show-off again. 666, Big Boss, you're awesome. Take me with you. Haha. Netizens began to mock Master Bao, and some even ridiculed traditional martial arts, thinking it was just for show and useless. Master Bao was carried off the stage on a carrying pole. Having defeated Master Bao, Master Dong became arrogant on the stage, loudly proclaiming to the tourists, "Now you all know, traditional martial arts are useless. I think you'd be better off learning combat sports and karate with me. Our national treasures are outdated. What are traditional martial arts now? Just fancy moves. All show and no substance," he lamented, speaking with the tone of someone who's been there all along. "Look at foreign things, they're all better than our Chinese ones. Don't let your nationalistic egos hypnotize you. Although our 5,000 years of Chinese civilization is indeed impressive, foreign things are better now. We must keep up with the times." These words immediately sparked a flurry of discussion among the tourists and spectators. On the platform, both the martial arts masters and the Taoist elders looked grim, glaring angrily at Master Dong. The netizens who had initially mocked the masters all turned in one direction. Isn't that going too far? Exactly. Master Feng and Master Bao can't fully represent traditional martial arts. To condemn them all like that is really unfair. They were indignant. Losing the competition wasn't a big deal, but when it involved China's 5,000-year-old civilization, something they were proud of, they couldn't help but be angry. Especially since Master Dong had denigrated their own country's traditions while forcibly praising foreign things, which made them even more disgusted. Any Chinese person would feel uncomfortable now and want to prove something for Chinese civilization. But they didn't have any good solutions, so they could only anxiously wait for someone to step forward and defeat this trash who belittled our national essence. Our country's traditions are almost all lost, aren't they? It's normal that we can't compete with others, someone suddenly said sadly, silencing the other netizens. A wave of disappointment washed over them. Chapter 55, Chinese civilization cannot compare to foreign civilizations. Yes. Since the Qing dynasty, many profound aspects of Chinese civilization have been lost, replaced by the invasion of foreign empirical science. If ancient Chinese science had developed step by step, perhaps it would have progressed faster and better than the West. Like traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine, if traditional Chinese medicine had developed better, the medical field might be completely different now. However, no matter how much they talked, they suddenly realized that what remained might actually be inferior to the West. Thinking of this, they felt a sense of despair and helplessness, followed by a long sigh. Master Dong's expression changed slightly when he heard the crowd criticizing him. However, he quickly recovered, his face still full of arrogance. Foreign knowledge had given him a sense of honor and belonging. Ignoring the murmurs of the crowd below, he suddenly turned to the platform, looking at the masters and Taoists sitting there angrily staring at him, and couldn't help but smile. "Masters, are you scared? Does anyone else dare to come out and fight me? Oh, right, and that brat, wasn't he amazing in the previous video? Come up here if you dare, let me test his skills, expose his fakery. Ha ha ha, don't worry, I'll go easy on you, I definitely won't hurt you." He laughed loudly, pleased to see the martial arts masters' pale faces. After mocking the martial arts masters, he looked towards the Taoist sect, scanning the elders of Longhu Mountain, Maoshan, Wudang, Zhanggai, Kunlun, and other schools. He smiled and continued to invite them. "I've heard that you elders are all highly skilled in Taoism, and even your martial arts are not bad. Why don't you come down and spar with me?" He looked at the old men with smug satisfaction. Don't let his foolish appearance fool you, he wasn't afraid at all. The Taoists who came were all old fogies. Even if they were skilled in martial arts, could they beat a young man like him? The saying youth has the upper hand wasn't just a saying. As for Taoist magic and spells, sorry, he didn't believe in them at all. This is the scientific age, anyone who believes in that old-fashioned stuff is a fool. He didn't think there was any such superstitious stuff, he was a staunch supporter of materialism. It seems today is destined to be the day I, Master Dong, achieve my legendary status. Ha ha ha, stepping over a group of martial arts masters and Taoist elders to rise to power, he was incredibly excited. The crowd and audience waited anxiously, hoping that someone would step forward to prove to them that Chinese culture wasn't trash and was definitely no worse than foreign things. At this moment, they also turned their gaze towards the Taoist sect, their hearts filled with anticipation. Hiding in the shadows, Su Yun sighed. "It seems this is the time for me to make my appearance." He had originally wanted to be cautious and observe more, but now there was no time for him to hesitate. Because this opportunity was truly a godsend, if handled well, the faith might be far greater than expected. Thinking this, he transmitted his head and mask to the divine stone space through the small black ball. Then, his clothes changed, and a flowing white robe appeared. A celestial sword, immortal, elegant and divine, was about to make his appearance. On the high platform, in the positions of the Taoist sect leaders and other representatives. Although they maintained their composure and their expressions seemed calm and collected, revealing nothing, they were actually filled with worry and gloom. "Brother Kingayan, why don't you go up?" The white-haired, immortal-looking leader of Longhu Mountain turned to the leader of Wudang Mountain and asked. The old Taoist Kingayan smiled bitterly. "I'm so old, I'd better not." "Then are we just going to let this junior continue to be so smug? Even a clay figure has some temper, let alone being provoked like this." Zhang Xianqi really didn't like this Master Dong. How could he be so sycophantic? Wasn't this traitor? If he weren't so old, he would have gone up himself. The Taoist representatives discussed among themselves, but after a while, they still hadn't reached a decision. The old Taoist priest Kingayan sighed, saying regretfully, "Alice, if only that young man I met not long ago were here, what a pity." "Oh, what young man?" The old Taoists were full of surprise, unable to imagine who could be so highly praised by the old Taoist priest Kingayan. "He's a very young man, very skilled, he's mastered martial arts to the level shown in martial arts movies. I saw it with my own eyes not long ago." The old Taoist priest Kingayan stroked his beard, his face full of regret. It was a pity he hadn't taken that young man into his sect after this incident. He regretted even more not having completely swallowed his pride back then. If only. Really, Zhang Xianqi and the others didn't believe it, thinking that the old Taoist priest Kingayan was just trying to comfort them. He said it was a young man, so how skilled could he be? Even if he could start cultivating from the womb, he couldn't reach the level the old Taoist priest Kingayan was talking about. They thought the old Taoist priest Kingayan was just bragging. Besides, even if that young man came, they wouldn't dare let their young man go up against him. If he got hurt, they would feel even more guilty than about saving face now. "What, are you Taoists scared too? You've been discussing this for so long, and you still haven't reached an agreement." On the stage, Master Dong scoffed impatiently. Inwardly, he was practically laughing hysterically, feeling his goal was about to be achieved. He was about to rise to power by stepping on Taoism and martial arts. The Taoist elders glared angrily, their faces filled with rage. The onlookers felt a chill. Even the mysterious Taoist sect had no masters. Were the essence of Chinese civilization truly useless, inferior to that of foreign countries? They thought despairingly. I'll go. The old Taoist priest King Guyan was furious, ready to risk his old bones and teach this arrogant fool a lesson. However, just as tensions were about to rise, screams suddenly came from the crowd behind the tourists. Whether it was the Taoist elders, the martial arts masters, the livestream staff, or other tourists, they all looked in the direction of the sound, puzzled. Thank you older than a mountain for the 100 Kidian coins. Surprised? Please give this a recommendation vote to show your support. Moi. Cap 3 Cap. Chapter 56, A Boy Who Seems Like a Fairy or a God. Suyun observed the gap in the crowd, and in a split second when no one noticed, he lightly stepped forward, appearing as fast as lightning on the mountain path around the corner. Then, he paused briefly before returning to normal, as if he had just arrived. Just then, someone emerged from around the corner behind him, immediately catching a glimpse of his back. His long, ink-black hair reached his waist, and his white robes shimmered faintly, billowing in the wind. Even just his back, amplified by his aura, caused those following him to stop in their tracks, completely mesmerized. On both sides of the mountain path, the green leaves and vibrant flowers rustled, a breathtakingly beautiful scene. On the mountain path, a seemingly real yet ethereal young man slowly and gracefully approached, his white robes subtly glowing, as if woven from snow-white silk, his appearance pure and otherworldly, his aura ethereal. The young man was like a banished immortal, as if he had stepped out of a painting. He was extraordinary. Even the most beautiful stars couldn't match his ethereal, otherworldly beauty in terms of looks. But what was truly remarkable was his aura, a divine, almost otherworldly quality. The moment he appeared, even in a fleeting, unintentional glance, people's gazes were captivated. Everything around them seemed to pale in comparison, their eyes fixed solely on the boy in his snow-white robes. The mountain peaks were covered in lush green leaves and wildflowers, swaying gently in the breeze, a breathtaking scene. But his appearance eclipsed that beauty. With screams of delight, the tourists froze. The moment they saw the boy, after the screams subsided, everyone was mesmerized, their eyes glued to him. Was he a celestial being from a painting? Untouched by worldly concerns, his vast, starry eyes filled the emptiness within, a greedy desire rising within them to linger a moment longer, as if that would grant them everything. A youth, seemingly unimmortal, walked slowly towards them. Everyone who approached instinctively hesitated, fearing that the youth might be tainted by worldly dust and defile him. The crowd consciously parted to make way for him, their eyes still following him. A banished immortal has descended to earth, everyone thought. Perhaps only a banished immortal could possess such beauty? He was simply traveling among mortals. The scene was quiet, no one dared to disturb the beautiful scenery, simply observing silently. They gazed upon this extraordinary, otherworldly being, with his ethereal grace and transcendent air. Soon, the banished immortal, carried by the mountain breeze, gradually arrived at the arena. The moment the youth appeared, everyone who hadn't seen him clearly before, whether it was the senior Taoist masters on the platform, the martial arts masters, the livestream staff, or even the viewers in the livestream room, instinctively stopped, collectively stunned. An immortal, there really are immortals in this world, the crowd snapped out of their daze and screamed in astonishment. There was no way to resist the boy's inhuman appearance and aura, even he himself was stunned, let alone them. Does our China truly have immortals? They thought in disbelief. The boy's appearance and aura were the best evidence they suspected, something no ordinary person could possess. Even with plastic surgery, you can only change your appearance, but even wearing white robes, if your aura isn't right, you're still just a mortal. Therefore, everything about the boy's inhumanity led them to this conclusion, especially his ancient clothing, which fueled their imaginations. On the high platform, the senior Taoist master, with his good composure, quickly recovered. What an extraordinary young man! A banished immortal, Zhang Xianxi of Longhu Mountain exclaimed. Something seems familiar, King Guyan, the old Taoist of Wudang Mountain, muttered. For some reason, looking at the boy and his aura, he felt a sense of familiarity, as if he had seen him somewhere before. After thinking for a while, a flash of inspiration struck him. I remember now, it's him. It's that young man, The other man's aura was truly extraordinary, especially considering they had only been separated for a short time. He immediately recognized him. "You know him?" the other sect leaders asked in surprise. "Yes," the old Taoist King Guyan explained. The sect leaders from Longhu Mountain and the others suddenly understood. They had initially thought King Guyan was exaggerating and boasting, but now they realized that it wasn't so strange that he could do such a thing. This damned world that judges by appearance. On the arena, Master Dong's face changed color constantly. He noticed that the audience, who should have been watching him, were now captivated by this young man in white. Although the young man was indeed extraordinary, that was not a reason for him to offend his interests. His future was at stake, and the young man's influence on him had been minimized. "Don't be fooled by him, everyone," Master Dong suddenly shouted. "What immortals? This is a materialistic and scientific world. These things don't exist." His words calmed the crowd's fervent emotions. Yes, how could any immortal in this world notice that the audience had all recovered from the boy's emotions, as if they had accomplished something great? He glanced at the boy with a smug look. As he looked, a hint of jealousy flashed in his eyes. Even as a man, he had to admit that this boy was indeed incredibly handsome, surpassing anyone he had ever seen, including himself, who was very confident in his appearance. He doubted that even plastic surgery could achieve this level. "What a boy that the heavens envy," Master Dong thought jealously, "but even if you look like an immortal, unless you're a real immortal, you'll still be trampled under my feet." A hint of excitement appeared on his face. Suyun stood in the open space, listening to this man's derogatory words, feeling only amusement, as if he were watching a clown. Master Dong was taken aback. The boy's eyes were indifferent, utterly indifferent. Like a high and mighty god looking at a self-important insect, an ant. This made him feel incredibly aggrieved, and at the same time, a sense of fear arose in his heart. That's the look a human could have. Startled for a moment, he chuckled, realizing he'd overthought things, and felt even more jealous of the boy who'd caused him to have such thoughts. Suddenly, a thought popped into his head, a thought that made him tremble with excitement. "Kid, don't you like pretending to be an immortal?" Master Dong mocked. "Since you're so powerful, why don't you come up and fight me? If you win, I'll admit you're powerful." Upon hearing this, Suyun's expression froze slightly, and the people in the arena and the hundreds of thousands of viewers in the live stream erupted in an uproar. Master Dong excitedly thought, "This is another chance to become famous, if I succeed." But before he could finish his thought, he was drowned out by a chorus of exclamations and worries. "No, little brother, don't fight this trash, you're already the best. Yes, even if you don't fight, I'll still love you. Don't be a show-off, ignore him, stay with me." Among the female voices, this one seemed somewhat rough. The deafening shouts, in unison, instantly drowned out everything else. They were deeply worried, fearing the boy might accidentally go all out, and what would happen if something went wrong? Thinking of this, their eyes glared at Master Dong with unfriendly anger. Master Dong's face darkened. He truly hadn't expected the boy's popularity to reach such a level, only one appearance. Had he been brainwashed? Unbeknownst to him, the live-stream room was already filled with his haters, a chorus of insults. Otherwise, he would have truly regretted it. Suyun, hearing the various well-meaning voices, smiled slightly with his ethereal face, immediately eliciting gasps from the crowd. "Since you don't dare, then," Master Dong smiled stiffly, feeling deeply resentful and secretly hating the boy. Sigh. Suddenly, a clear, flowing voice echoed softly. Suyun's expression was melancholic, and a captivating pressure suddenly emanated from him. The noisy crowd fell silent, and the summit of Wudang Mountain descended into stillness. Everyone's expression froze, feeling the pressure emanating from them. They were shocked. Then, an even more shocking scene unfolded. Under the watchful eyes of hundreds of thousands, the young man leaped lightly, his white robes fluttering as he soared several meters into the air, as graceful as a falling leaf. Just as they were about to land, a delicate white jade sword, gleaming with a faint light, slowly appeared beneath his feet. It was as if the white jade sword had vanished into thin air and materialized the moment his toes touched the ground. The young man, stepping on the white jade sword, rose slowly into the air, his white robes billowing around him. A mysterious light began to emerge and flow slowly, as if celestial energy was surrounding him. The flowing celestial energy made the young man seem otherworldly, as if he were transcending the mortal realm, about to ascend to immortality. At this moment, the young man seemed to become the center of light in the world, everything else fading in comparison. Everyone held their breath, speechless. Hundreds of thousands of spectators, their minds completely blank. Everyone was stunned. Thank you, Starry Sky Manager, for the 300 Kidian coins. Thank you, Mysterious Person Dwelling, for the 100 Kidian coins. Thank you, Older Than a Mountain, for another 100 Kidian coins. Thank you all. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 57, This is not scientific. Oh my god, this is unscientific. Am I dreaming? Be confident, you can remove the knot, you're definitely dreaming. That's right, we're dreaming, otherwise how could we see an immortal? Newton must be turning in his grave. After their initial shock, they all screamed impossible in their hearts, but this real scene couldn't be fake, so, everyone was filled with horror. Master Dong stared blankly at the immortal in the sky, his heart filled with regret and terror. Why didn't you reveal your immortal identity sooner? How could I have offended you then? He was on the verge of tears, his heart filled with grief and indignation. At the same time, his materialistic beliefs of the past 30-odd years had completely shattered. He secretly regretted his underestimation of China's 5,000-year-old civilization. Now that even immortals existed, who would dare to underestimate anything from this ancient land? Not only him, but hundreds of thousands of viewers had their worldviews shattered. Compared to materialistic knowledge, how could it compare to the reality of seeing it with their own eyes? Who needed to believe it? Moreover, the boy had flown up in front of everyone, and there was an aura of immortality around him. All of this could be faked. If anyone told them that this boy wasn't an immortal, they would drown him in their spittle. An immortal. A sword immortal. The old Taoist Kingayan and the other sect leaders of Longhu Mountain were also shocked, their beard stubble falling off in fright. Among them, their shock was even greater, because they knew more about immortals, making it even more unbelievable. Having spent most of their lives reading Taoist scriptures, they knew many legends about immortals, even methods for cultivating immortality. None of them had ever mastered it, and even they harbored doubts, believing that immortals didn't exist. But seeing it with their own eyes was a different story. This incredibly realistic scene shattered their long-held disappointment and suspicion. A thought arose in their minds, perhaps their cultivation methods were flawed, and the legends of immortals in ancient texts were true, perhaps not just exaggerations and fabrications? They were incredibly excited. Floating in the air, a gentle breeze caressed their faces, causing Su Youngsu's white robes to flutter, making him appear even more ethereal. Standing on a white jade longsword, he looked at the excited and shocked tourists, a hint of satisfaction flashing in his eyes. Then, a thought struck him, and his gaze turned towards the horrified Taoist practitioners. His expression was melancholic, such a look on his ethereal face seemed to dim the surrounding light, causing hundreds of thousands of spectators to instinctively feel a pang of unease. A voice like a flowing spring rang out. Has it already reached the end of the Dharma era? Not a single person possesses cultivation. The Taoist sect has declined to this state. His tone was heavy with doubt and regret, as if he had just emerged from seclusion and was still unclear about the situation. He wasn't just making this up. Among the crowd below, he genuinely hadn't sensed a single person possessing even a trace of extraordinary energy. Having become a god, he was incredibly sensitive to energy. Unless there was a concealment technique, nothing could escape his notice. Since he couldn't sense it, it meant there might be no extraordinary beings in the real world. Thinking this, a subtle glint flashed in his eyes. The leaders of the end of Dharma Taoist sects, along with hundreds of thousands of spectators, all began to wildly speculate. There were already rumors about the Dharma ending age online, and now even immortals seemed to be saying it. Could it be true? That's why they couldn't succeed in cultivation. The old Taoist priest Kingayan and the others suddenly understood, but at the same time, some doubts arose in their hearts. How did this immortal cultivate under such circumstances? Zhang Xianxi of Longhu Mountain suddenly stood up, excitedly bowing towards the sky, and said, "May I ask your esteemed title, immortal?" Su Yun was slightly surprised, not expecting this old Taoist to be so bold. His mind raced, and a flash of inspiration struck him. He calmly replied, "Just call me Qingchen." He sighed, "I came here today hoping to see how the Taoist sect is doing, but I didn't expect." He turned his gaze to the arena, looking at Master Dong standing there. His gaze turned slightly cold. As his divine power circulated, an even stronger pressure was born, spreading outwards and causing everyone to pale. Especially Master Dong, who was being focused on, coupled with the immortal's gaze, caused his legs to buckle, and he knelt on the ground, his face deathly pale. His face was filled with terror. Suyun coldly gazed at Master Dong. I never imagined that such a vast Taoist sect could be so easily suppressed by a mere scoundrel, leaving no one with any skills, your martial arts reduced to utter worthlessness, and no one daring to utter a sound. Upon hearing this, both the Taoist practitioners and the other spectators paled slightly, a hint of shame creeping into their expressions. Suyun sighed. But it's no wonder. Not a single person possesses any cultivation. Your martial arts methods must have lost their essence. No wonder you are humiliated by barbarian tricks. Master Dong, hearing this, was filled with terror. His will to survive surged as he cried out, "Immortal, I know I was wrong." Tears streamed down his face, his heart pounding, filled with remorse. He vowed that if given another chance, he would diligently practice traditional martial arts, perhaps even becoming a Taoist monk, and would never again dare to touch the barbarian tricks the immortal spoke of. He now only hoped that the immortal would spare his life, seeing his remorse. He prayed desperately in his heart. Master Dong's pitiful state secretly pleased the onlookers, who also felt proud of their Chinese civilization. This was an immortal. Their China had immortals, something foreign countries couldn't compare to. At this moment, they recovered from their previous disappointment, replaced by a sense of belonging and pride in their nation. Suyun was unaware of Master Dong's thoughts below, but even if he knew, he wouldn't care. He was just an ant, not worth his attention. At this moment, he noticed something else. From the moment he took flight, the power of faith began to appear. He felt a dense surge of faith power, and his divine power began to surge. Thank goodness, the real world really can provide faith. Suyun secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Before the results were revealed, he had been somewhat nervous, fearing he wouldn't be able to gather enough faith power from the real world. Now he could finally relax a little. His divine spark gradually rose to orange. Now halfway there, he would advance soon. He could feel threads of faith beginning to form, but they were all ordinary lines, with only a few exceptions of thicker ones. It seems the real world really isn't a breeding ground for faith. Although he was playing a sword immortal, not a god, which resulted in fewer believers, it was definitely related to the fact that modern people are not easily brainwashed. However, he didn't care too much. As long as the base number was large, wouldn't the threads of faith be plentiful? The real world has many people, but few other things. While happy, he also had some doubts. Even with the power of faith, is there really no extraordinary being in the real world, or is it because of my godhood that I can receive the power of faith? Thank you for the 100 Kidian coins reward. Thank you for the 100 Kidian coins reward. Thank you for the 100 Kidian coins reward. Thank you. Chapter 58, Advancement Goal Achieved. Regardless, he decided to test the Taoist sect again. Just then, the head of Longhu Mountain gritted his teeth and respectfully asked, "Immortal, how can we cultivate?" Upon hearing this, hundreds of thousands of spectators perked up their ears. Indeed, this was what they most wanted to ask. They too desired extraordinary power and immortality. Especially immortality, something ancient emperors had always longed for. Even Qin Shi Huang had sent people to search for immortals for a long time, only to die in vain. Now, a tremendous opportunity lay before them. They were fortunate enough to meet an immortal. How could they not try to glimpse the path to immortality, even if the chances were incredibly slim? Suyun pondered for a moment, then smiled slightly, feigning confusion, and asked, "Does the Taoist sect truly have no one with cultivation right now? Perhaps you are merely outer disciples of the secular world, with a hidden faction among you." The immortal's question cleared the minds of hundreds of thousands of spectators, a flash of inspiration crossing their faces. Yes, from the immortal's question, they learned that the Taoist sect must have had immortals in the past, but not anymore. Is it possible that, as the immortal said, there really are hidden, unseen core members who possess extraordinary power? Thinking of this, as if they had stumbled upon some secret, the audience became excited and shouted in unison, "Taoist masters, does your sect truly possess a method of cultivating immortality? Are there many hidden masters? Tell us." Hearing the enthusiastic inquiries around them, the leaders of Longhu Mountain and the other sects exchanged bewildered glances. What outer sect? They were just sect leaders. They didn't even know about any hidden forces, so how could they possibly say anything? And what cultivation method? If such a thing truly existed, wouldn't they cultivate it? If they had truly succeeded, why would they be here at this lousy martial arts tournament? At this moment, some of them were on the verge of tears, and those so-called masters were even more. Wait. Thinking of this, some of them suddenly had a wild idea. Could there really be some masters, like those depicted on TV, living in seclusion in the mountains, or perhaps even as a sweeper? Thinking of this, they became excited, secretly vowing to thoroughly investigate when they returned, not letting any clue slip by. Especially the sweeper and the scripture hiding, they had to pay close attention. They hadn't noticed them before, they had just assumed they were ordinary old people, but now that immortals had appeared, what was impossible? They didn't want to miss out on a master, or they would regret it. At this moment, some ordinary old people in the Taoist sect felt a tremor in their hearts, as if some terrible thing was about to happen. Suyun floated quietly in the air, and with his exceptional hearing, he also heard words like sweeper and scripture hiding. It seems the Taoist sect truly has no cultivators left. As long as they don't all resort to hiding their true nature, they can basically roam freely in the real world. Suyun was secretly delighted. Without extraordinary power, with his upcoming advancement strength, as long as he was careful, practically nothing could harm him. Just as he thought of this, he suddenly sensed something unusual about his divine spark. Realizing something, he immediately took a moment to check his divine spark with delight. Complete, the divine spark, connected by dense threads, was now 99% covered in orange, reaching the critical point. As long as he released the restrictions, he could immediately advance to second-level deity. Wait a bit longer, let's finish dealing with things here first. Suppressing his impatience, Suyun prepared to retreat. He had already been present for some time, staying too long might allow him to be locked onto by modern technology, so it was best to leave first. Suyun looked at Zhang Xianxi of Longhu Mountain, who had finished his whispered discussion and was about to ask a question, but before he could speak, Suyun spoke first. When the time comes, you will naturally know. Don't be impatient, Suyun said calmly, giving an ambiguous answer. As for when the time would come, that was up to him. A vague idea began to form in his mind. Faith, cultivation, what if it were given a different form, a different platform, like visualizing the existence of light? The closer one is to light, the stronger one becomes. He vaguely grasped this idea, but since there was no immediate need, he was too lazy to refine it, deciding to wait until later. The leaders of Longhu Mountain and the others looked disappointed, opening their mouths as if to say something. Suyun naturally wouldn't give them the chance. Enveloped in radiant immortal energy, he appeared like a celestial being. He spoke first, a slight smile on his celestial face, and softly said, "This matter is settled. We'll meet again if fate allows." With that, his figure, standing on a white jade immortal sword, gradually rose into the air, about to break through the void. Holy crap, the immortal is leaving. No, the netizens and the crowd below were shocked. The immortal was leaving, and everyone's face immediately showed anxiety. Please, immortal, have mercy on us and linger a little longer, Zhang Xianxi of Longhu Mountain cried out in alarm. They were truly reluctant to let such a rare and precious immortal slip through their fingers. He knelt down and bowed deeply. Seeing Zhang Xianxi's action, the others were slightly taken aback, but quickly followed suit and knelt on the ground. After one person repeated the immortal's words, the others followed suit and shouted in unison, "Please, immortal, have mercy on us and linger a little longer." This, Suyun's face showed surprise, his figure, surrounded by mortal energy, hovering in the air. He was somewhat surprised by these people's actions. He had originally intended to leave, but now he was in a dilemma. What should he do? Suyun thought for a moment, then suddenly thought of something, and his eyes lit up slightly. Alice, a clear sigh flowed through everyone's hearts like a clear spring, as if all their worries could be dispelled by this sound. Well, there's something amiss, the immortal's clear voice echoed on the mountain top. Just as their faces showed joy, the immortal's words continued. Your encounter with me is your destiny, and I now bestow upon you a divine opportunity. A flicker of pity crossed Suyun's ethereal, flawless face, and enveloped in immortal aura, he appeared like a saint. Before the crowd could react, his figure rose higher, and with a gentle wave of his right hand, the sleeve of his snow-white robe billowed. Then, to the astonishment of the crowd, a shimmering, dreamlike pale green light, like the aurora borealis refracting from the clouds, momentarily dazzled their eyes. The magnificent pale green aurora descended from the sky, enveloping the entire Wudang Mountain. The aurora penetrated matter, passing through every plant and animal touched by its light. Plants regained their health, their colors becoming even more vibrant, while animals and people. After a few seconds of stunned silence, screams erupted from the crowd. "Ah! My body, my illness is cured, my God!" People without serious illnesses felt much lighter under the aurora, as minor internal problems and hidden injuries disappeared. In just a moment, their health returned to its peak, and their lifespan seemed to have increased. Those suffering from serious illnesses, such as cancer and other terminal diseases, were awe-stunned, their expressions blank, completely dumbfounded. Among the tourists, a middle-aged woman in her 40s with a face full of frost touched her thin cheeks in a daze. Hume, who had been pale and weak, found that her aching stomach had disappeared the moment she was under the aurora, and her body had returned to the healthy state she had longed for. Hume knew that her cancer was gone. This feeling was so strong that she knew the answer without even needing a checkup. She knew her body better than anyone else. "Mom, you are better," a teenage boy said, his eyes red and tears streaming down his face as he looked at his mother, whose face had regained its rosy hue. Today, his mother wanted to come to Wudang Mountain to pray for blessings. He initially disagreed, worried about her health, but reluctantly agreed after her insistence. But at this moment, he was incredibly grateful that he and his mother had come here. "Thank you, immortals," the two kneeling on the ground prayed devoutly. A miracle. Not only the two of them, but many tourists who had fallen ill, regardless of their ailments, were all restored to health under the aurora's miraculous light. They embraced each other, weeping with joy. Suyun looked at the jubilant crowd below, a serene smile playing on his lips. "The task is complete, I can leave now." Feeling the surge of divine power, he felt it was all worthwhile. Before the crowd could react, Suyun gave them one last deep look, then chuckled softly in the air. "Until we meet again." The sound of flowing spring water faded, slowly echoing through the mountains. With a final note, Suyun's body flashed with immortal light, and he stepped onto a wide jade sword, transforming into a dazzling beam of light that shot straight into the sky. In the air, the celestial figure vanished without a trace. Respectfully bidding farewell to the immortal, the stunned crowd, led by the sect leaders of Longhu Mountain, immediately shouted in unison. "Respectfully bidding farewell to the immortal, respectfully bidding farewell to the immortal." The deafening voices echoed, everyone's heart filled with joy, and sincere, beautiful smiles unconsciously appeared on their faces. "Thank you Starry Sky Administrator for 100 Kidian coins." Chapter 59, Advancement to Second Level Godhood. "What a pity, we couldn't get the cultivation method from the immortal," Zhang Xianqi said regretfully as he stood up. Yes, the other sect leaders also expressed their regret. "You're all just greedy." Kingai Liodeo shook his head with a smile. "If you ask me, the immortal is kind-hearted. Being able to get the immortal's blessing to cure our old ailments is already a great fortune." Hearing this, the other sect leaders also came back to their senses from their regret. Compared to the elusive cultivation method, the cure for their ailments was a real benefit. Although they were healthier and longer lived than other elderly people because of their cultivation, they were still prone to age-related illnesses. Now, after being cleansed by the immortal's blessing, they felt comfortable all over, as if a lot of burdens had been lifted, and they even looked younger. They were all extremely grateful to the immortal. "Brother Kingayan, you said you knew an immortal before." Suddenly, the Maotian sect leader's eyes lit up, and he asked out of the blue. The sect leaders were slightly taken aback, then all looked at Kingayan the old Taoist with fervent eyes, excitedly exclaiming, "Really, Kingayan, you're amazing, tell us quickly." They hurriedly pulled Kingayan the old Taoist along. He was an immortal, and they didn't want to miss any opportunity. "Oh," Kingayan the old Taoist smiled bitterly upon hearing this, "don't flatter me. I only met an immortal once, and I didn't even know he was an immortal then. Otherwise, I would have pestered him long ago." As he spoke, he beat his chest and stamped his feet. He was filled with regret for missing his chance with an immortal. If he had known the other party's identity earlier, the sect leaders thought he was right. Otherwise, given Kingayan's shameless nature, he would have definitely pestered the immortal, begging to be accepted into their sect. But even so, being able to exchange a few words with an immortal was enough for them to envy. At this moment, a clear female voice suddenly rang out from below the stage. "May I ask, elders, does your sect truly lack the method of immortality?" the little fish streamer asked loudly. As she spoke, tourists followed suit with a barrage of questions. Hearing the buzzing inquiries, Zhang Xianxi and the others exchanged glances, immediately feeling a headache coming on. Saying no would be unacceptable. After all, an immortal had appeared. To deny it would be tantamount to deceiving the world. But saying yes was also uncertain, leaving them in an awkward position. Helpless, they could only calmly ignore the questions. Not wanting to lose face, they all wore enigmatic smiles. This immediately brightened the audience's eyes, and they all began to imagine. Could it really be true? Looks like I should send my child to the Taoist sect to learn some cultivation techniques. Learning martial arts is a waste of time, one parent exclaimed with a sigh. The audience had a wonderful misunderstanding. It was foreseeable that the Taoist sect would gradually recover from its decline. As for Master Dong standing on the stage, no one paid him any attention. In their minds, Master Dong was like a clown. The idea that he could compete with an immortal was already ingrained in their minds. Some netizens even joked, "Tisk, this Master Dong is awesome, daring to challenge an immortal. Amazing, haha, that's right, I bet he can brag about this for the rest of his life. This is the peak of his life, he can blow this out of the roof off." 666. Soon, Master Dong became the object of everyone's ridicule, and even some malicious people created funny pictures of him. Master Dong became famous. However, Master Dong had just secretly rejoiced at his unexpected good fortune when he was utterly devastated. Netizens discovered that Master Dong had been blocked. Whether searching for Master Dong or his full name, no results were found. Content about him was heavily censored. Obviously, some clever netizens immediately guessed that this must have been a crackdown by the authorities. As for the reason, netizens speculated that he must have offended an immortal, which led to his being blocked. And the truth was pretty much as they guessed, except that offending an immortal was only a small part of the reason. More importantly, the other party actually spread unfavorable information during the live broadcast and television broadcast, which is inconsistent with the country's positive and optimistic ideology. Of course, this also included the other party's sweeping generalization, offending not only the Martial Arts Association but also the Taoist Association. Especially offending the Taoist sect. With so many believers, it can be said that the other party's death was not unjust. And these are the main reasons why the other party was blocked and banned. Suyun flew quickly all the way, even removing the immortal aura effect halo around him, and secretly entered the mountains and forests. After stopping, he carefully sensed for a while, and only breathed a sigh of relief after confirming that there was no uncomfortable feeling of being monitored. It's good that I wasn't monitored by satellites or anything. He wasn't too surprised. He had only appeared for such a short time, and the country was probably still in shock. If they could react so quickly, he would be surprised. Suyun looked at himself, and with a thought, changed his clothes into ordinary short-sleeved shirts and shorts. Then he touched his dark hair. What a pity, in order to avoid his hair attracting attention, even if there was only the slightest possibility, he had to fix his hair. After quickly destroying the evidence of his hair and restoring his short hair, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Having done all that, he then removed the divine power from his face, otherwise he would have had to constantly maintain that appearance. Hiss, his face shifted, and a soreness followed. Healing spell, Suyun quickly healed himself, finally recovering from the after effects of the cosmetic surgery. Having finished all that, he focused his attention on his body. The divine power that had been mostly depleted by the large-scale healing spell was now fully replenished. Advancement, a slight smile appeared on his lips, and with a thought, he immediately released the restrictions. Instantly, the last remaining crimson was eagerly dyed orange. The divine core and characters completely turned orange. Whoosh! The divine core trembled gently, emitting a series of clear sounds. An orange flame spontaneously ignited around the divine core. Similar to the last advancement, the divine core melted into a pool of orange liquid, then quickly solidified again. Soon, a dazzlingly beautiful orange divine core with 27 facets appeared in the space. Aside from that, unlike his last advancement, he wasn't enveloped in a white cocoon. However, he could still feel his divine body being rapidly transformed by divine power, becoming even stronger with each advancement. Even his physical body seemed to undergo subtle changes, as if he were one step closer to perfection. Suyun smiled helplessly, choosing to ignore it. With the advancement, most of his original divine power was consumed, but fortunately, with the connection of thousands of faith threads, his faith power was rapidly recovering. He carefully checked the quantity. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. Excluding the more than 500 threads broken from the void, he had harvested 4,375 threads this time. Almost 5,000. Seeing this number, he breathed a sigh of relief, and he knew that as the real world grew, the number would definitely increase. Although it might not be as good as today's results, the quantity should still increase significantly. The majority should be supplied by the live stream, Su-Yoon mused. Although he didn't know the exact number of viewers in the live stream, he guessed it was considerable. Given his modern-day identity and his status as a sword immortal, obtaining so many threads of faith was undoubtedly due to the sheer number of people. Of course, the tourists from Wudang Mountain also contributed significantly. That final healing spell was practically a finishing move, turning almost all the tourists into believers. The god of ice, Su-Yoon chuckled. With his current level 2 godhood, he wanted to see just how powerful the god of ice was, and give him a huge surprise. He was really looking forward to it. After thinking this through, he glanced around to make sure there was no threat. Let's go back and check. With a thought, he focused his consciousness on the small black sphere. However, upon contact, he noticed something unusual, because he discovered that his control over the small black sphere had increased again. Surprised, he tried to control this small black sphere. The black vortex gradually expanded, but unexpectedly, it didn't absorb anything, because he had suppressed it. Soon, the whirlpool stopped at the size of a wash basin. He vaguely realized this was the limit of his control, but he ignored it, as he was already astonished by what he saw. This wash basin-sized space was like a transparent layer of water, through which he could see a vast expanse of white on the other side, the divine stone space. At the same time, a feeling surged through him. He vaguely sensed some power trying to pass through the water, but it was being blocked. Su-Yoon felt a familiar power and immediately released the restriction. As soon as he released it, his divine spark underwent a change. A dense power of faith surged in, like swallows returning to their nests, and was transformed into divine power by his divine spark, the previously broken threads of faith reconnecting. The space has been opened up, Su-Yoon murmured in slight surprise. No, that's not right. He felt that the space hadn't been opened up. The transparent water was proof of that. It was because he released the restriction that the power could pass through the water. After a moment of surprise, he turned his attention back to the matter at hand. With a thread of faith, things became much easier. He didn't need to go there personally. With a thought, he activated divine descent, transferring a small portion of his consciousness to the old priest's thread of faith. As soon as he arrived, Su-Yoon sensed the old priest's consciousness falling asleep. He skillfully controlled the old priest's body. Opening his eyes, he glanced around. It was a wooden hut. This old man really knew how to enjoy himself. Looking outside through the wooden door, thank goodness, it's still night, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief, rearranging the old priest's body and closing his eyes, as if the old man were sleepwalking. The old man didn't notice at all. Withdrawing his consciousness, Su-Yoon turned off the little black sphere. The ice tribe should attack after dawn. Looks like I need to speed things up. He planned to test a character ability first, then take the body home, and then wait for the god of ice to come knocking. A smile appeared on Su-Yoon's lips as he focused his consciousness on the characters. Soon, he obtained information about the ability, thanks to Starry Sky Manager for the 100 Kidian coins reward. Chapter 60, New Character Ability Test. Fire. Su-Yoon pondered. As expected, it's indeed the power of fire. This result wasn't unexpected, and he even felt a surge of joy. Although he didn't know if there were any limitations, with proper operation, he could still deliberately create certain characters. Let's test its power first. Thinking this, he extended his right palm and activated the character with a thought. Boom! The next moment, a fist-sized, milky white flame began to burn in his palm. Su-Yoon looked at the flame in amazement and tried to increase the input of divine power. Boom! The flame surged, rising directly to more than half a meter high. The blazing white flame gave people a sense of holiness and purity at first glance, as if it could purify all filth. Thinking of testing its power, he controlled the fire to smash it into the ground. With a soft sound, the flame began to burn on the blackish-yellow ground. Su-Yoon stared intently at the ground, and then he was surprised to find that the oil that came into contact with the flame slowly disappeared. It was as if it had been burned away. He carefully observed the burning process. During the calcination process, the soil was visibly dispersed, then shrank and disappeared. A pit quickly appeared on the ground. It's a bit like it's been decomposed, he muttered to himself, stroking his chin. This oil left nothing behind. Logically, if it were just ordinary fire, there should have been some residue, but now it was perfectly clean. Thinking of this, he tried to suppress the decomposing ability of the flames. This ability was truly subjective. Just by thinking about it, the decomposing ability of the flames actually disappeared. In the fire pit, this oil that would have disappeared after being burned was now preserved. However, it couldn't be said to be completely preserved. Some impurities were burned away, and this oil gradually became finer and purer, this oil layer looking somewhat like ceramic, with an incredibly smooth and delicate surface. Soo-yoon frowned slightly, withdrew the thought of suppressing the decomposition, and the next second, the delicate ceramic was completely decomposed, revealing the normal ground below. He removed the flames and looked thoughtfully at the large pit that had been burned out. He had roughly tested the fire's abilities. One was decomposition, and the other should be purification, able to remove impurities from objects and retain the essence. Furthermore, the flame gave him a sense of holiness, and it seemed to have a restraining effect on forces like darkness. Overall, not bad. It's another way to attack. Soo-yoon was in a good mood. This advancement could be considered a significant increase in strength. Besides the characters, his divine power had also grown much stronger, at least 20 or 30 times stronger than when he first became a god. After testing his abilities, Soo-yoon smiled slightly, his divine power surging. Then, his figure slowly floated into the air, finally hovering motionless a meter high. Finally, I don't need to rely on external objects anymore, Soo-yoon thought with a smile. Time to go back. Half an hour later, relying on his increased strength after the advancement, his speed increased dramatically, and he quickly crossed a city, quietly returning home unnoticed. The black vortex gradually spread. Silence returned to the room, with only the sound of shallow breathing. Yanhoang tribe. As dawn broke, most of the tribe's people got up early. The morning dew clung to the plants, filling the air with a fresh, natural scent that invigorated the senses and gave one a feeling of being one with nature. In the clearing, plumes of black smoke rose intermittently. The tribe's people were each starting fires. Having mastered the method of fire making by friction, they didn't bother to preserve embers, and, still caught up in the excitement, driven by a sense of accomplishment, everyone wore smiles as they enthusiastically rubbed fire together. In a corner of the clearing, Lai, a prisoner of the ice tribe who had been thrown out of the cave and was now sleeping in the open, was just waking up. He was pretending to be asleep when he was drawn by the sounds from nearby. He cautiously opened his eyes a crack and witnessed the Yanhoang tribe's people starting fires. A moment later, as he watched, his vision blurred. His first thought was that he was dreaming, and he blinked hard until the pain in his body reminded him that he wasn't dreaming. In that short time, he witnessed a savage inexplicably fiddling with a piece of wood, doing something, and then, a fire suddenly appeared out of thin air. If he hadn't reacted quickly, he would have cried out in astonishment. How is this possible? How did they do that? In his bewilderment and shock, he watched as one savage after another started a fire. Clearly, this wasn't an isolated incident. This left him utterly astonished and bewildered. Is it divine magic? Thinking this idea, which even he himself didn't believe, his greed grew stronger with each passing moment. If the tribe mastered this method, wouldn't they be able to start a fire anytime, anywhere? If that were the case, going into the wild would certainly be safer and more convenient. Thinking of this, Lai felt a surge of resentment and jealousy. Why does this small tribe have so many good things? The more he thought about it, the stronger his destructive urge became. Especially when his gaze inadvertently shifted towards the wooden house, his pupils contracted sharply. Compared to the fire, the meticulously crafted wooden house, exuding an artistic aura, gave him an even stronger sense of awe, as if this thing shouldn't exist in this place. Thinking of his own tribe's huts built with branches, vines, and tree trunks, he was utterly astonished. The contrast was stark. He couldn't find any excuse for his tribe's defeat. He had lost. Furious and humiliated, he roared inwardly, "A bunch of cave-dwelling savages." Impossible. He didn't want to believe it, but like trying to start a fire by rubbing sticks together, he saw savages building something in the distance. Clearly, this was the hut. At that moment, his pride shattered completely, his self-esteem utterly crushed. Even a savage tribe lived better than them, with that incomprehensible method of starting fires. God, tell me this is all a lie, Lai murmured desperately to himself. But reality was there, No matter how he thought about it, the fact that his tribe was inferior to the savage tribe seemed undeniable. However, perhaps luck was on his side. Shortly after his desperate prayers, a voice suddenly rang in his mind, instantly filling him with ecstatic joy. It's a god. Upon making contact and learning that the god would soon come to his rescue and, incidentally, annihilate the savage tribe, he was overjoyed. Then, a flash of inspiration struck him, and he excitedly told the god of ice everything about the tribe's treasures and the wild god's situation. Just wait, that damn god of light, the god will avenge me soon. Not only will you perish, but the tribe's treasures will also belong to our tribe, making us even stronger, Lai thought with joy and excitement. He didn't believe that a wild god from a small tribe could be a match for the god of ice. The outcome was already obvious in his mind, the ice tribe. When the god of ice heard about the wooden hut and the inexplicable method of starting fire, he was initially somewhat incredulous, but it was indeed what the believer thought, without a trace of falsehood. In that case, a mere first-level god dares to offend me, but considering the benefits you've brought me, I'll act swiftly, allowing you to retain the last shred of your divine dignity, the god of ice sneered, his eyes filled with greed and impatience. With the resources of that small tribe, his tribe would undoubtedly become stronger, and with a stronger tribe, he would naturally become even stronger. Don't blame me, blame yourself for opposing me, the god of ice shook his head pityingly, seemingly reluctant, but the cruelty and excitement in his eyes betrayed him. After thinking for a moment, he quickly gave an order to his tribesmen. Soon, the ice tribe was ready to depart. Thanks to Starry Sky Administrator for the 100 Kidian coins reward. Thank you to Purple Jade Fragrance for the 100 Kidian coins reward. Thank you to Starry Sky Readers for your continuous rewards over the past few days. Thank you. Chapter 61, The God of Ice Strikes. Within the Divine Stone space, a vortex appeared, and Su Yun emerged from it. After appearing, he surveyed the outside world. 3 days had passed, and the entire tribe was thriving. Everyone's complexion had improved, clearly indicating that the fish, despite their suffering, had contributed significantly to the tribe's prosperity. Furthermore, the trees around the cave entrance had been completely cleared, leaving a large open space. Thanks to the diligent efforts of the tribe's people, a dozen or so wooden houses had already been built nearby. Now, we just wait, Su Yun murmured to himself. He then relayed the news of the divine war to the old priest. The old priest was greatly alarmed upon hearing this and immediately called out to the tribe's people. A clash between gods, the mere thought was terrifying. The tribe's people began to feel apprehensive, but the impression that gods could solve anything filled them with confidence, excitement, and anticipation for the upcoming divine war. Just as the two tribes were about to clash, 5 primitive people dressed in rough hemp clothing, their appearances quite unfamiliar, were slowly walking around, occasionally glancing around, seemingly searching for something. Their current location was approximately a kilometer upstream from the Yanhuang tribe's river, and they were slowly walking downstream. Yan, why are we walking along the river? A man in his late 20s asked, somewhat puzzled. Yan, a robust man in his 30s walking at the front, glanced back at the 4 people behind him and, seeing their confusion, smiled. Walking along the river makes it easier for us to encounter other tribes, Yan explained with a smile. But aren't we looking for wild, divinely bestowed plants? The man asked, even more confused. Seeing that none of the 4 newcomers understood, Yan shook his head helplessly, then said in a teaching tone, follow the river, we can find divine plants too, and we can also find other tribes along the way. Don't underestimate those small tribes, sometimes they have good things. If we're lucky, we can easily get some good stuff. Even if there are knowledgeable ones, we can trade them with the divine fruits we carry. A sure win, Yan explained slowly and methodically, and the other 4 suddenly understood. I see. Time passed quietly. Inside the divine stone space, Su Yun suddenly opened his eyes. They're here. He sensed a powerful aura that made no attempt to conceal itself, along with more than 20 weaker auras, slowly approaching a place not far from the tribe. In the open space outside the cave, nearly 600 tribesmen gathered together, their faces showing anxiety and unease, yet also a hint of excitement. At this moment, on the central altar surrounded by the crowd, the divine stone suddenly shone brightly, invigorating the tribesmen. Surrounded by light, Su Yun suddenly appeared above the divine stone. Enveloped in the light, the crowd, for some reason, felt even greater awe at the sight of the same figure as before. God, God, the tribespeople cried out respectfully. Suyun's gaze was somewhat solemn as he stared into the distance. Glancing at the wooden hut, he decided to take the initiative, lest those uninvited guests ruin the believer's hard work. With that thought, he moved swiftly, flying towards the location where he sensed the presence. Soon, he saw a group of more than 20 primitive men dressed in animal skins, tall and muscular, wielding bone weapons. However, Suyun ignored them, focusing instead on the sky. A middle-aged man, also dressed in animal skins, with a muscular, bronze physique and a rugged appearance, floated 6 or 7 meters above the primitive men. To be honest, when Suyun first saw this god of ice, he thought he was seeing things. Was this really not a primitive man but a god? But then he thought about it, and it made sense. He himself might appear different due to the special nature of his light godhood, or the influence of his own mindset, combined with modern clothing. This other god's appearance, on the other hand, was more normal. God of ice, Suyun asked calmly, exchanging a glance with the other in midair. When he saw the other, the people from the ice tribe naturally noticed him as well. Seeing this god's appearance, the ice tribe members were all surprised. Even the god of ice was astonished, a flash of jealousy crossing his eyes. Without comparison, there is no harm. The god of ice had been proud of his superior physique and appearance, because no one in his tribe was stronger and more imposing than him. But now, compared to this god of light, he found himself seemingly outshone. Whether it was his clothing or the light surrounding him, everything about him was inexplicable. A god who could radiate light, his eyes were filled with astonishment and jealousy. His mood soured, and he said in a strange tone, "Oh, god of light, I didn't expect a newly born god like you to recognize me." The god of ice smiled, his words laced with sarcasm. Suyun, naturally, wouldn't be intimidated. He adopted his old keyboard warrior persona and calmly retorted, "You certainly aren't qualified to recognize me. It's normal that you don't." His words immediately silenced the other. "You?" Anger flashed in the god of ice's eyes, and a murderous intent flickered in his heart. "You, a mere tribal god, dare to be so disrespectful to me? Aren't you afraid?" He was a second-level god, full of confidence, and he didn't even consider this first-level god in some backwater a threat. Thinking of this, he suddenly remembered something, and a malicious smile appeared on his lips, making Suyun frown. Sure enough, the next second, the god of ice grinned and suggested, "God of light, I happen to need a divine servant. I think you're quite good. How about coming back to the tribe with me?" Ha ha ha! The ice tribe members below were stunned for a moment, then burst into loud laughter. The god's idea is excellent. Yes, they whispered among themselves, completely confident in the god of ice. Evil god, how dare you?" In the distance, the Yanhuang tribe members who had followed, worried about the evil god, were enraged to hear his henchmen and the evil god dare to insult the god of light. They roared in fury. A cold glint flashed in the god of ice's eyes as he turned his gaze towards the direction of the voices. Looking at those people, he immediately sentenced them in his mind. They could keep the god of light company. "It seems you trust him a lot." The god of ice glanced at the god of light, who had remained unresponsive, simply floating silently in the air, and suddenly sneered. "Then I'll let you see for yourselves how your god is defeated by me." With that, he glanced at his people behind him, and the dozen or so immediately understood, hastily retreating. As they retreated, they excitedly gazed at the sky, anticipating the great god of ice displaying his divine power and letting the god of light know the vast difference between gods. In their hearts, the god of ice was the strongest. Suyun watched the god of ice's taunts quietly, as if watching a clown's performance. After watching for a while, he only felt a little amused. Noticing that his opponent was about to attack, he also gestured for his people to retreat, then calmly said to the god of ice, "Since you've finished your last words, then I'll send you on your way." The god of ice's divine talent allowed him to clearly understand the meaning. Instantly, he flew into a rage. "You're courting death?" With a roar, he gripped his fist tightly, and a long ice crystal spike instantly formed. Without another word, he shot it towards the foolish fellow who had given him an opening but failed to recognize the opportunity. The ice spike flew through the air. "Want to die? Then I'll grant your wish." The god of ice chuckled coldly. This attack, though simple, was a full-force strike. Aside from any divine magic, he was prepared for his opponent's divine blood to be scattered everywhere. Thanks to Starry Sky Administrator for the 100 Kidian coins reward. Chapter 62, You are a level 2 deity. Yan, leading 4 others, had just arrived near the Yanhuang tribe. They stared in astonishment at the two deities flying above them. Are they gods? Green Spot asked Yan somewhat flusteredly. The auras of warrior gods and deities were vastly different, so he immediately recognized the two. But it was precisely because he recognized them that he was even more surprised. Deities weren't something one could encounter casually, let alone two at once. And judging from the posture of these two deities in the sky, it seemed a battle was about to begin. That one in the animal skin coat is the god of ice. I've seen him before, Yan said solemnly. Then he turned his gaze to another deity. As for the other one, he hesitated, his eyes thoughtful. I haven't seen him before. I've investigated all the tribes nearby with deities, and there shouldn't be one like him. If I didn't miss him, then he must be a newly born deity. Oh, the four of them, including Green Spot, seemed to understand. Then Green Spot asked curiously, Brother Yan, who do you think is more powerful? Yan glanced at him and said confidently, I've heard of this ice tribe. They're the deity of a tribe with about 2,000 people nearby. Although their numbers are smaller than our tribe, they're still quite powerful. I haven't heard of the other one. He should just be the god of a small tribe. I'm more optimistic about the god of ice. The other four nodded in agreement. It was undeniable that the number of people in a tribe sometimes represented the strength of a deity. That was common knowledge. Even though this newly born deity seemed strange, different from ordinary deities, they didn't believe that this deity could break this rule. Just as the five of them finished their discussion, the god of ice unleashed an ice spike. Its immense power caused them to gasp in surprise, their eyes filled with fear. At the same time, they lost even more faith in the unfamiliar god. Suyun stared at the icy blue ice spike, its sharp point gleaming with a chilling light, clearly demonstrating its formidable power. However, he wasn't one to back down, immediately retaliating with an incredibly concentrated pillar of light. The ice spike and the pillar of light collided. Boom, a deafening explosion erupted, and a powerful shockwave swept through the surrounding area. The two attacks neutralized each other. The god of ice's eyes flashed with surprise, only to be astonished to discover that his ice spike had only neutralized half of the opponent's pillar of light. The remaining pillar continued its trajectory towards him. What? Before he could utter another word, he hastily conjured a thick layer of ice, instantly blocking the attack. The remaining power of the pillar of light exploded onto the ice, cracking it several times with a series of snapping sounds, almost shattering it completely. Unfortunately, the pillar of light vanished entirely. However, the shock it caused remained. The god of ice discovered that not only had the imagined scene not occurred, but it was also completely unexpected. He had been overpowered. Impossible. He stared intently at the luminous figure, his heart pounding with turmoil. Below, the Yan Hoang tribe cheered, while the ice tribe warriors stared in disbelief, unable to believe their eyes. Had their great god failed? The god must have held back. Their confidence in the god of ice made them believe this with absolute certainty. In the distance, Yan and the other four exchanged shocked glances. This incomprehensible scene was beyond their comprehension. Compared to the ice tribe warriors who mindlessly made excuses for the god of ice, they, as outsiders, saw things much more clearly. They knew this was definitely not the ice god holding back. The first time, they could say that, but the second time they vaguely saw the ice cracking, they knew it couldn't be an accident. This meant, the god of this small tribe had truly suppressed the ice god. But wasn't he the god of a small tribe? How could he possibly suppress the ice god unless? The five of them simultaneously realized something, their eyes filled with disbelief. You're level 2 god. Sensing something amiss, the ice god also noticed the aura released by Suyun, realizing he was a level 2 god just like himself. Then, like the other five, the ice god fell into deep confusion. Whether it was Lai's intelligence or what he had seen with his own eyes, he didn't believe this small tribe could have 2,000 people. Even more than that, the other party was a level 2 god, and could even suppress him. What kind of strange thing was this? How did you do that? He was filled with shock and doubt. Suyun smiled coldly and didn't answer. It was a good question, but only an idiot would reveal their trump card, especially one related to the secret of the little black ball. This was the first time the god of ice had been so blatantly ignored. Enraged, he laughed. He refused to believe that this enemy god, whom he had disregarded, could suddenly transform into a god of equal rank, an insult. Thinking this, he roared, "Ice crystal spell!" As his voice fell, over 1,000 highly condensed ice crystals, dazzlingly bright, floated around him, a dense, chilling sight. Then, With a wave of his hand, a biting wind carrying the terrifying ice crystals swept towards Su-yun, who appeared minuscule in comparison, like a blizzard. This terrifying scene caused those below to tremble with fear. "The great god of ice has gone all out," the ice tribe members exclaimed ecstatically. "This little tribe's wild god is doomed." Chief, priest, god, the one-armed spearman looked anxiously at the sky. They all felt a biting cold wind below, a testament to the terrifying power of the attack. The chief looked at the old priest. The old priest shook his head, firmly stating, "Have faith in God." "Oh, it's vastly different from what the believers could do," Su-yun thought to himself, showing no concern. This move reminded him of the few followers of the ice god who had visited the tribe before. They had also used this technique. However, in terms of quality, power, and quantity, the version performed by the ice god far surpassed theirs. But it's fine, it'll be a good time to test the power of the characters. With that thought, Su-yun activated the fire character. Just as the ice spikes came, a ball of white fire appeared in his hand, rapidly expanding into a wall of flame that directly clashed with the ice crystals. The moment the ice crystals touched the white flame, they began to melt and disintegrate, disappearing rapidly. Seeing that the ice crystals had all melted away, but a portion of the white flame remained, the ice god's face darkened. Chapter 63, Clash of Divine Arts. "This god of light can even use fire," the god of ice cursed inwardly. "If it were just fire, it wouldn't be so bad, but the opponent's fire should have been countered by ice crystals. One was a physical entity, the other an illusion. It was obvious his side should be stronger. But what kind of strange fire was this? Even his ice crystals couldn't gain an advantage. Damn it!" The flames surged forward, a wave of heat hitting him. The ice layer can't stop it. Helpless, he had to use another divine spell. Ice shield. A huge, perfectly formed ice shield instantly appeared in front of him. Boom, the flames crashed against it. The god of ice had just breathed a sigh of relief when he suddenly saw something, his expression changing slightly. This fire, he discovered that the ice shield, apart from some melting, seemed to have been burned away by this strange white fire. Thinking this, he couldn't help but feel a little wary. Fortunately, only a portion of the fire remained. After the ice shield was slightly damaged, the strange white fire dissipated completely. He had just breathed a sigh of relief when Su-yun made another move, making him instinctively wary. Fire character test done, now let's test healing character, Su-yun muttered to himself, feeling no remorse for using the god of frost as a testing machine. Healing spell, a dazzling aurora screen, several meters wide, appeared in the air, rapidly enveloping the enemy. The god of frost's expression changed slightly. Although he didn't know what it was, its imposing presence and unique color clearly indicated it was a divine spell. He absolutely couldn't be hit. But running was too late, the pale green aurora was incredibly fast. He cursed, "Damn it," a thought struck him, and he moved his shield forward, attempting to block the green light. However, an unexpected scene unfolded. The green light pierced through the ice shield, directly hitting him in his carelessness. The god of frost's expression changed drastically, as he felt a change in his body. Weakness. This was a feeling he rarely experienced, as if all his divine power had been exhausted. Yet, the surging divine power within him reminded him otherwise. It seemed to be merely a physical and mental weakness. "What did you do to me?" the god of ice glared through gritted teeth. Seeing the good results, Su-yun smiled faintly at this guinea pig. "You're sick and need treatment. The treatment can't stop. This move is called a healing spell. It's specifically for treating patients like you." As he spoke, he glanced at the god of ice with his emotionless eyes, making the god of ice shudder involuntarily. Nonsense, the god of ice naturally understood, but precisely because he understood, he thought the god of light was toying with him, and was instantly furious. Su-yun shook his head helplessly. "Alice, these days even gods don't believe in the truth. Is it the decline of morality, or the distortion of divinity?" This was indeed a healing spell, and the way the god of ice was repeatedly taken advantage of left the onlookers dumbfounded, especially the people of the ice tribe, every one of whom looked on in disbelief. After sighing, Su-yun didn't waste any more words. While maintaining the healing spell, he directly reached out and condensed a 9/10 golden light sword. With a flick of his wrist, the light sword shot through the air, making a rapid movement sound. The god of ice sensed the danger and hurriedly used his divine spell again. Ice shield, but as soon as he cast it, he noticed that the power of the divine spell had weakened. He glanced at the pale green light around him, his face grim. Damn it, it's this damned green light. Crack. The two were locked in a stalemate for a second, finally ending with the ice shield shattering. The god of ice was shocked and hurriedly used the ice shield again. Only when this ice shield also shattered did the golden longsword dim and dissipate. The god of ice's face turned ugly, and he couldn't help but feel a desire to retreat. He said, his voice blustering but his heart pounding, "God of light, you're really something. You win this time," he shouted quickly to the believers on the ground, "let's go." With that, he turned around impatiently, as if a monster was chasing him, and was about to fly away. He was truly terrified. Not only was the god of this small tribe inexplicably a second-level god like himself, but his divine power and magic were also far superior. How could he possibly fight like this? Although unwilling, retreat was the only option left, otherwise, continuing the fight would have unpredictable consequences. The Ice Tribe warriors below, hearing this, were somewhat disappointed, but still turned and left. Trying to leave, a soft laugh suddenly rang out, then the voice turned cold. "I think you'd better stay." This god of ice really thought this was his home, coming and going as he pleased. He had even boasted about taking in divine slaves. If he weren't strong enough, the thought of it would be terrifying. The two had a previous grudge, and with today's events, it was practically a fight to the death. And yet, the other side thought he could leave when things looked bad? He was really dreaming. The god of ice felt a jolt of fear, a strong sense of crisis washing over him, forcing him to turn his head warily. At that moment, he saw a white sphere of light seemingly forming in the god of light's hand. Stop him, or it'll be dangerous? This thought flashed through his mind instantly, a flicker of terror in his eyes. Without hesitation, he unleashed an ice crystal spell, hoping to stop his opponent's attack. Over 1,000 ice crystals swept out, a biting wind howling. Unfortunately, it was too late. Suyun, prepared, also unleashed a white flame. Boom, flames surged. But no one cared anymore. Hundreds of eyes were focused on the golden sphere in Suyun's hand. In just 2 or 3 seconds, this sphere, over 90% golden, which sent chills down the spines of those below, was formed. Those who could sense the energy could feel an intense sense of danger emanating from it. Suyun coldly glanced at the god of ice, his right hand gripping the fist-sized golden sphere. "Golden wheel," a chilling voice echoed. With a soft whoosh, a dazzling golden light flashed. The god of ice's expression changed. He felt the strongest sense of crisis he had ever experienced as a god. "Thank you Kongming for the 200 Kidian coins reward. Thank you for the 200 Kidian coins reward. Thank you 1 for the 500 Kidian coins reward. Thank you for the 200 Kidian coins reward. So many rewards. I suddenly have the illusion that this struggling author is about to take off. I feel like I'd be letting you all down if I didn't work hard, so I'll try my best to update. Thank you, everyone. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 64, A Battle of Consumption. A beam of golden light, shimmering like glass, struck the distant god of ice with lightning speed, almost too fast for anyone to react. Compared to before, the upgraded golden wheel was significantly more powerful. Even its range had increased considerably, naturally placing the god of ice several meters away, within its attack range. Startled, the god of ice instinctively activated his ice shield spell, a thick ice shield instantly forming in front of him. However, even this didn't give him any sense of security. Taking advantage of the brief moment the golden beam struck the first ice shield, he quickly conjured another ice shield to block it. While releasing the ice shield spell, he also dodged rapidly. Boom, the golden beam struck the first ice shield, cracking and shattering for less than a second before piercing through it. The golden beam then hurtled towards the second ice shield, maintaining its attack for half a second before both ice shields were pierced in quick succession. The god of ice shifted his position slightly, but still couldn't completely dodge. With a groan of pain, the golden pillar grazed his ribs and pierced through him. Instantly, pale blue divine blood, shimmering with a strange light, flowed out, some splashing onto the ground. Upon contact with plants, it seeped into them, causing the plants to grow wildly as if nourished, even their appearance slightly distorted. This scene surprised Suyun, causing his attack to pause slightly. "God of light, you?" The god of ice roared angrily, his face contorted with rage. "You really want to fight me to the death? Don't think that just because you have a slight advantage, I can't beat you. If this continues, you won't have an easy time either." Recalling the dangerous moment just now, he was filled with lingering fear. If he hadn't dodged, he might have really died at the hands of this god of light. His heart was filled with rage, his eyes fixed on the god of light, ready to fight to the death at the slightest provocation. Su-Yun coldly watched him, saying nothing. Only the golden pillar of light he swung in his hand served as his answer. "Good, very good." The god of ice's eyelids twitched as he noticed the golden pillar continuing to sweep towards him, and he couldn't help but laugh in fury. "Don't think I'm afraid of you." After saying this, he quickly retreated. Having experienced this killing move, he dared not continue to experience the power of the golden pillar. He believed that this move must consume a lot of divine power. As long as he could dodge for a while, when the opponent was exhausted, that would be his time to counterattack. During his dodge, he repeatedly released ice shields to block the golden pillar's path, and even though the effect was not great, it bought him time to dodge. Of course, the most important thing was that the golden pillar no longer had its initial explosive speed, making it much easier to dodge. Just like a fly, Su-Yun frowned slightly, constantly waving his hand at the distant fly up, down, left, and right, but the fly seemed to know the power and dared not make contact with the golden pillar at all, instead circling around it the whole time. A few seconds later, the golden pillar began to dissipate, and to the god of ice's delighted expression, it directly vanished into starlight. "Haha," the god of ice laughed loudly. His appearance was far from good. He had been accidentally cut several times, divine blood dripping from his wounds. But he was in high spirits because he had survived. That damned god of light on the other side, his divine power must be greatly depleted now, he thought with absolute certainty. However, when those below saw the god of ice's disheveled state, they were utterly astonished. The ice tribe members felt their illusion shattered, unable to believe it was real. The god of ice, out of the corner of his eye, naturally noticed the expressions of his followers. His face immediately darkened, and he glared resentfully at Su-Yun in the distance, the one who had so greatly damaged his prestige. In a fit of rage, he unleashed his last remaining divine spell, shouting, "Blizzard!" As soon as he finished speaking, Su-Yun was astonished to see a violent blizzard form around the god of ice. Within a radius of 20 or 30 meters, the air was filled with frigid snowflakes and howling winds, turning everything into a white expanse. The entire world instantly turned frigid, the plants were covered in snow, and even those watching from afar shivered as the chill seeped into their bodies, making them feel as if they had been transported to a harsh winter. The third type, Su-Yun saw that the opponent had unleashed a third divine spell. Given its instantaneous nature, it must be the third character. Thinking this, he felt a slight surge of joy, as he had been worried that each level could only have one character. Without thinking too much, the blizzard struck, and even his divine body felt a long-lost chill, his body stiffening slightly. Not daring to be careless, he quickly used the fire character, white flames sweeping in front of him to block the chill. However, at this moment, he discovered an unexpected situation. The god of ice had vanished. No, it should be said that he had hidden in the snowstorm. The divine magic hadn't weakened, so the opponent definitely hadn't left this area. It was just that the snowstorm was too strong, completely obscuring his vision. The god of ice had even concealed his aura, causing him to frown. The blizzard and the flames were locked in a stalemate in the air. Su-Yun was somewhat confused about what the opponent was trying to do. "Damn it, let's see how long you can hold out." The god of ice, hiding in the blizzard, gave a cold, sinister laugh. Knowing that he couldn't defeat this detestable fellow head-on, he decided to stall. That's right, stall. In his opinion, this strange god had used such a terrifying move earlier, and his divine power must be greatly depleted now. Although his opponent was also a second-level deity, he knew the size of the tribe's population perfectly well. Even if the second-level deity was from a small tribe of a few hundred, how could he possibly be crushed by his 2,000 followers? He refused to believe he couldn't defeat them. He decided to focus on the quantity and duration of their divine power. Furthermore, this blizzard attack, despite its imposing presence, was the least energy-consuming of his 3 divine spells. This way, the balance would shift, and no matter how powerful his opponent was, he had already imagined the god of light's calm demeanor in the early stages, his furrowed brows in the middle, and his anxious despair in the later stages. He was incredibly pleased with himself for coming up with this plan. Although the reality differed slightly from the god of ice's expectations. Su-Yun now only had about 40% of his divine power left. Time passed quietly, and the blizzard and white flames reached a stalemate. Trying to wear me down, Su-Yun muttered to himself. If he hadn't understood it at first, now, after nearly 10 minutes, with his total divine power below 30%, he gradually grasped the meaning of this calculated scheme. That treacherous god of frost. No god is easy to deal with, he frowned. Without the opponent revealing himself, he couldn't find him either. He had considered retreating, but each time he did, the opponent would follow. This god of frost was deliberately trying to wear him down. I must think of a way, or my divine power will be exhausted sooner or later, Su-Yun pondered deeply. After his divine power was reduced to a dangerous level of 20%, his eyes suddenly lit up, as if he had thought of something. A contest of divine power, huh? I'll let you have your way, Su-Yun chuckled. Then, he quickly transferred his consciousness to the divine space. Upon seeing the small black sphere, a thought struck him, and he directly activated a black vortex. The vortex gradually expanded, and a transparent water curtain the size of a wash basin appeared. At this moment, Su-Yun suddenly sensed the dense power of faith on the other side of the spatial passage. As expected, overjoyed, he quickly released the restrictions. Chapter 65, The Battle Ends. As the restrictions were lifted, a surge of faith power accumulated by thousands of people over this period immediately rushed in, rapidly restoring his divine power after the transformation of his divine essence. 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%. The faith of thousands of people accumulated during this period directly replenished his divine power to 80%. This was still because the time was too short. If more time had passed, given that the believers in this modern world hadn't cooled down and their thoughts were still very fervent, his divine essence could have been completely filled. That's enough, Su-Yun breathed a sigh of relief, then laughed. I'll see if you can hold out longer than me. After thinking this, he didn't close the vortex. With the assistance of nearly 5,000 people's faith, he stood with his arms crossed in a circle of flames, quietly watching the show. He wanted to let his opponent know what it meant to not court death. 5 minutes later, as time passed, a thick layer of snowflakes accumulated on the ground. That should be about enough, right? The god of ice smiled coldly. He figured the god of light was almost out of power, and the thought of the anxious and desperate look in his eyes filled him with a sense of relief. 10 minutes later. Probably just holding on, the god of ice guessed confidently. However, 15 minutes later. How is this possible? He was shocked to discover that the god of light had exceeded his expectations, managing to hold on until now. He knew his own divine power was only about 20% remaining. That damn guy, how could he hold on for so long? A slight unease crept into his heart, and he even considered giving up. But upon further reflection, he thought that the guy might collapse at any moment, and giving up now would be a waste. Just a little longer, with red eyes, like a gambler on a high note, he gritted his teeth and made this decision. 18 minutes later, the god of ice's divine power had dropped to 10%. Damn it, I can't hold on much longer. His face was pale, he couldn't believe it. That guy had used up so much divine power, and only had a few hundred followers? How could he possibly compare to him with 2,000 followers? How could he possibly believe that? 20 minutes later, the god of ice felt a chill in his heart. His divine power was about to be exhausted. The divine spell could no longer be maintained. It's alright, the god of light should be like me. Finding an excuse in his mind, he forced a smile and cancelled the divine spell. The blizzard gradually subsided, revealing a clear sky, and the things on the battlefield slowly came into view. The god of ice stared intently ahead with boundless anticipation in his eyes. Seeing a ball of fire in the air, his heart trembled. Su-Yun stood quietly in the air, surrounded by a layer of faint white flames. After seeing the blizzard disappear, he withdrew the flames. Instantly, Su-Yun saw the god of ice staring intently at him. Immediately, he couldn't help but smile, looking at the other party with a half-smile. The god of ice's face turned horrified. Looking at Su-Yun, whose expression hadn't even changed, clearly not having exhausted his divine power, he felt extremely unreal and roared in anger. How could you still have divine power? He began to doubt his own existence. This is the difference between you and me, Su-Yun said calmly. The god of ice's face darkened. His current divine power couldn't even unleash a single divine spell. He suddenly moved, ignoring his clansmen behind him, attempting to fly away under their incredulous gazes. Monster, "This god of light is a monster," the god of ice murmured, his face pale and trembling. He regretted coming to this god-forsaken place. Otherwise, he wouldn't have encountered this unreasonable monster. Unfortunately, his attempt to escape was wishful thinking. Suyun wouldn't let this formidable enemy go. A wounded weed will always be reborn. A ball of light condensed in his hand, and a golden sphere was born 2 or 3 seconds later. No, looking at the god of light chasing after him and the golden sphere in his hand, he was gripped by fear. For the first time since becoming a god, he felt a breath of death. "Don't attack," the god of ice pleaded, desperately begging for mercy. "God of light, I'm willing to be your subordinate god, just spare my life." Upon hearing this, the Yanhuang tribesmen below were stunned for a moment, then cheered proudly. The great god of light had defeated the evil god. The faith of the ice tribe members shattered instantly, their faces turning ashen. In the distance, Yan Wu and his companions swallowed hard, their expressions filled with shock. The god of ice's face flushed red. After uttering those words, he naturally saw the expressions of the onlookers, and his mind collapsed. He hated Suyun to the core. It could be said that the more wretched he was now, the more he hated Suyun for causing all this. If it weren't for him, how could he have lost his dignity, and even gritted his teeth to utter the agonizing words of becoming a subordinate god? "Oh," Suyun paused, looking at the guy with a half-smile. He truly hadn't expected the god of ice to be so afraid of death, begging for mercy without hesitation in the eyes of his followers just to survive. Seeing Suyun stop, the god of ice was overjoyed. "I can merge the entire ice tribe into your tribe, and I also," he said, secretly relieved. "Absolutely no god can refuse this." PFFTA cold voice rang out from Golden Wheel. Why? The god of ice slowly lowered his head, staring in horror at the golden pillar piercing his chest, then looked up at him in astonishment. "One god is enough for the tribe," Suyun said calmly, his expression unwavering. This god of ice was clearly a man of restraint. He didn't want to keep a thankless wretch in the tribe, otherwise he wouldn't sleep soundly. But most importantly, the tribe truly only needed one god. And that was indeed Suyun's thought. Even if the god of ice truly submitted, he wouldn't accept it. Everyone has different values, and he couldn't tolerate the existence of a second god in his tribe. Perhaps others would happily take other gods as subordinates, maybe even forming a pantheon in the future, but he felt one god was better. Being a god king was nothing compared to being the only god. "You," the god of ice's expression shattered, revealing resentment. He never expected the other party to be able to restrain himself. "I curse you, from now on, with me." Filled with resentment and bitterness, he prepared to utter his vicious words. Suyun frowned slightly and slashed upwards. PFFTA golden pillar sliced through the god of ice's chest, from the top of his head. The god of ice's expression froze, not even having time to utter his curse. "Godfall. Thanks to Interesting Cat for the 200 Kidian coins. Reward. Thanks to Starry Sky Manager for the 200 Kidian coins reward cap." Chapter 66 Itinerant Merchants. With a final, resentful look in his eyes, the god of ice dripped divine blood, his body losing its buoyancy and plummeting towards the earth. "No!" cried the ice tribe members below, their eyes wide with horror and panic. At the same time, whether among the ice tribe members here or in distant tribes, at the moment of the god of ice's fall, everyone felt a pang of grief and sorrow, tears streaming down their faces. Especially the divine warriors, their extraordinary power seemed to have lost its source, slowly withering away. The entire ice tribe was thrown into chaos. "Avenge the god, we'll fight you to the death." The ice tribe's divine warriors felt the loss and sorrow within them, coupled with the scene they had witnessed. Although they didn't want to believe it, they knew their god was gone. They had lost their deity, and the ice tribe would inevitably decline in the future. Even they, the divine warriors, would soon lose all their power. The fate of the tribe was unimaginable. Therefore, they hated the god of light who caused all this to the core, and were determined to die. As believers, they not only fought for the god, but also died for the god. These ice tribe warriors roared and unleashed their divine magic, causing ice crystals to form. Although not as powerful as those of the god of frost, their numbers were still quite impressive. Suyun frowned slightly in the air. It seems these people's faith is as steadfast as that of death squads. They really aren't afraid of death. There was basically no need to keep these warriors alive, especially since they had attacked him. With a sigh, before the ice crystals could strike, he waved his hand, and a large expanse of white flames appeared, surging towards the group. Soon, The difference between gods and mortals became apparent. Even the level 2 warriors among them were vulnerable under his fiery onslaught. The ice crystals melted instantly. Amidst screams of agony, the white flames, like a ferocious beast, devoured the ice tribe members in the blink of an eye. Not long after, the sound disappeared. After he extinguished the flames, the place was empty, and those people had vanished without a trace, not even leaving behind ashes. The 5 people watching from a distance couldn't help but shudder, fear flashing in their eyes. After killing these people, Su-Yun couldn't describe his feelings. He felt neither excitement nor joy, purely a matter of perspective. Shaking his head, he turned his gaze to the location of the ice god's corpse. In a flash, he landed there. Huh? Su-Yun's expression was surprised. Near the ice god's corpse, amidst the flowing divine blood, any plant that had come into contact with even a trace of divine blood had undergone some transformation, appearing more vibrant and seemingly shimmering with a faint fluorescence. Extraordinary plants, spiritual plants, Su-Yun murmured to himself after a moment of contemplation. Sensing the plants slightly, he discovered that they did indeed possess energy, albeit very little, and it appeared to be of a low level. However, this low level was only relative to him. If a mortal consumed them, the effect should be quite good. I didn't expect divine blood to have the ability to alter plants. I wonder if these plants are edible. Extraordinary plants aren't necessarily beneficial. If these roadside weeds are poisonous and turn into extraordinary poisonous plants, eating them would be disastrous. Ignoring these useless things, he shifted his gaze to the divine corpse. Upon closer inspection, he noticed something unusual. The ice god's body had become somewhat ethereal, as if it would soon dissipate into nothingness. This scene reminded Su-Yun of his own ethereal body when he first became a god. It seems the divine body is ultimately different from the physical body. I wonder if, with advancement, it will become identical to the physical body, he pondered thoughtfully. After thinking this, he purposefully sensed the divine corpse. The divine spark has disappeared. Surprised, Su-Yun produced a lightsaber and stirred the area where the divine spark was, but unfortunately, he found no trace of it. That most precious thing, with the ice god's demise, had inexplicably vanished. Although he had expected it, its actual disappearance still left him somewhat disappointed. Without his divine essence, he looked at the even more ethereal divine corpse. What should I do with this divine corpse? After a moment's thought, he suddenly waved his hand and summoned white flames again. After suppressing the decomposition function, the white flames blazed and burned the divine corpse. As the flames burned, the divine corpse became even more blurred, then gradually melted, turning into a large mass of divine blood. Sensing the rich aura of the god of ice on it, he frowned slightly. As if sensing his displeasure, the white flames became very intelligent, and as they burned, they slowly burned away the part belonging to the god of ice, treating it as impurities. Then the mass began to shrink and gradually solidify, finally appearing as a transparent crystal in the flames. This was a crystal radiating a rich, unclaimed energy. Looking at this thing, he thought for a moment and reached out to put it away, thinking he might need it later. Having dealt with the problem of the god of ice, Su-Yun turned to look at his clansmen in the distance, then his figure moved and floated up again. He quickly flew back to the divine stone space. As he left, the clansmen relaxed a little and cheered. The god had destroyed the evil god. In the distance, they actually won. I really don't know how that deity did it, Green Spot exclaimed. Brother Yan, is that deity really from a small tribe? Could the intelligence be wrong? He asked curiously. At this, the other 3 perked up their ears, as this was exactly what they wanted to ask. Yan was also somewhat uncertain, hesitatingly shaking his head. I don't know. Logically, the intelligence shouldn't be wrong, if a tribe with more than 1,000 people really appeared nearby, unless they recently moved there, they should have noticed it long ago. Looking at the 4 dejected men, he suddenly suggested, let's go check out that tribe together. Green Spot and the others hesitated for a moment, then all nodded in agreement. They were very curious about what that tribe was all about, whether it was really a small tribe, or if there was anything special about it. Yan Hoang tribe, who are you? A middle-aged man noticed the 5 uninvited guests. As he spoke, a dozen people surrounded them, all looking at them warily, ready to fight at the slightest provocation. After what happened with the ice tribe, they were very wary of outsiders, fearing they might encounter another of those freakish individuals. Don't be nervous, we are traveling merchants from afar, we mean no harm. Yan stepped forward and quickly explained. The dozen or so Yanhuang tribesmen looked at the 5 men dressed in strange clothes, tall and muscular, without a trace of thinness, and their expressions became somewhat puzzled. Thanks to for the 999 QQ reading points reward. Thanks to for the 500 Kidian coins reward. Thank you for the support of all the big shots. By the way, QQ reading actually recommended this. Amazing. Cyrillic letter deck. The next update will be very late. No need to wait. Cap. Chapter 67. Divinely gifted plants. Green Spot, standing beside Yan, subconsciously glanced at the animal skin clothing these people wore and their malnourished complexions, and a hint of pride flashed across his face. He had initially been somewhat fearful of the gods, but now he relaxed a little. That's right, we are itinerant merchants, he stepped forward and said proudly. We carry many things with us. If you have anything good, you can trade with us. He secretly anticipated the shocked and surprised expressions on their faces. Never heard of us, really? The Yanhuang people stared at him suspiciously. Several blows landed on Green Spot's face in quick succession, and his expression froze. How can you prove it, Spear? One of the dozen or so men asked with a frown. He noticed that these 5 people seemed to be completely empty-handed, not at all like they had much. Wait, Yan glanced at Green Spot to silence him, then took out a palm-sized, slightly flattened, light green pouch from his waist. He opened the pale green lid of the pouch, squatted down, and poured the contents downwards. Then, a miraculous scene unfolded. A large pile of items poured out, forming a small mountain half a meter high. Most of them were colorful fruits, with the rest being earthenware jars, their contents unknown. Mao stared in astonishment at the fruits. He couldn't quite place if it was just his imagination, but he felt a faint glow emanating from them. Aside from the fruits, the earthenware jars also caught his attention. They looked familiar. He seemed to recall the priest having a few of these before, apparently used for storing things, but they had broken, much to the priest's regret, and he hadn't seen them since. These are the fruits of divinely bestowed plants, Yan explained, seeing the puzzled looks on the Yanhuang people's faces. Wait a minute, I'll go call the priest. Mao gave them a deep look, gave the others an instruction, and then turned and left. Inside the divine stone space, Suyun, who was recovering his divine power, had also noticed the 5 people when they entered, as they all possessed extraordinary auras that made them impossible to ignore. However, when he saw the 5 people's appearance through the threads of faith, he was surprised. Hemp clothing, although their clothes were rough and ugly, and certainly uncomfortable to wear, modern people would probably get blisters in them. But even with its flaws, it was still proof of civilization's progress. Just seeing this, Su Yun indirectly guessed the strength of that tribe. At least the ice tribe couldn't compare. And the strength of their gods. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but sigh. The time was simply too short, both the tribe's development and his own strength were lacking. Otherwise, he wouldn't have even glanced at hemp clothing, let alone taught his people how to make it. His people would at least wear cotton clothes or better silk, not animal hides. After sighing, he saw something resembling a storage bag, and his brows furrowed even deeper. Noticing that Spear and the old priest were preparing to greet the 5 people, he had a sudden thought and murmured, I need to test them out and see who these 5 are. With a thought, a part of his consciousness separated and instantly entered the old priest's body. He then squeezed the old priest, causing everything to go black, and he lost consciousness once more. Priest, what's wrong? Spear looked at the priest, who was still standing there, with a puzzled expression. Suyun was startled, then came to his senses and coughed a few times, covering his mouth with his hand. Cough, nothing, let's go. He led the way. The 2 quickly reached the outskirts of the tribe. Just as they arrived, Suyun saw the man with the storage bag picking up fruit from the ground. The man placed the fruit on top of the bag, and then the fruit shrank. Looks like it's not a special bag, but a shrinking function. A thoughtful look flashed across Suyun's eyes. You're the priest, Green Spot exclaimed in surprise. This old man gave him a very special feeling, seemingly even more powerful than the priests in their tribe, and he could even vaguely sense a dangerous aura. Keep in mind, he was a level 2 warrior. Thinking of this, the disdain in his eyes instinctively disappeared, replaced by a sense of apprehension towards this seemingly harmless old man. Sure enough, this tribe, though seemingly simple, was definitely a facade. Suyun glanced at him indifferently and nodded slightly. He subtly scanned them. They're all level 2 warriors, each with a bag. It's not that unusual. Just then, Yan, who had finished picking up the fruit, stood up. He smiled gently. "Respected priest, my name is Yan. We are traveling merchants from afar, hoping to conduct some trade with your tribe." "Oh," Su Yun feigned surprise. "What do you have, and what do you want to trade?" Hearing this answer, the 5 merchants perked up. "Here it comes. We have some fruits from divinely bestowed plants," Yan explained. He picked up the pale green bag again, but this time he didn't spill it. Instead, a red energy emanated from his hand and entered the bag. Then, a fruit about half the size of a fist appeared in his hand, entirely blood red, with a faint red glow on its skin. The moment the red energy appeared, Su Yun's eyes flickered slightly. He sensed a scorching heat and a vague guess formed in his mind. Yan took out the fruit and continued to explain, "This is a blood-replenishing fruit. Eating this when injured can replenish blood." As he spoke, he reached into his pocket, and the red fruit in his hand transformed into a yellow one. "This is a constitution fruit, which can enhance physical constitution. This is a healing fruit, which can accelerate wound healing. This is a strength fruit, which can increase strength." In the blink of an eye, this guy named Yan pulled out 4 different colored fruits from his light green pocket. As Su Yun listened, a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. He guessed, the fruits of extraordinary plants, so many special effects. He guessed that these must be the fruits of extraordinary plants. As for why they were called divine fruits, considering the status of gods in this world, he wasn't surprised at all. However, he frowned slightly, his mind racing as he pondered how these plants came to be wild or cultivated with divine blood. Unable to figure it out, he feigned curiosity and asked, "I wonder what divinely bestowed plants are." The 5 people exchanged glances, and finally, 4 of them looked at Yan, clearly wanting him to make the decision. Divinely bestowed plants aren't exactly a secret, Yan thought to himself. This tribe's god seems very powerful. I might as well sell one. The fall of the ice god at the hands of this tribe's god had left a deep impression on him, making him unwilling to easily offend this tribe, even if their own tribe's god was far more powerful. Chapter 68, How to Obtain Divinely Gifted Plants. Thinking this, Yan smiled slightly and said, "Divinely bestowed plants are plants with special energy. Different plants have different effects, possessing all sorts of magical properties. The lesser effects are only useful to us mortals, while the more powerful ones, I've heard, can even affect gods. However, these plants generally grow in the wild, and their appearance is very different from other plants, making them easy to identify. But they are guarded by strange beasts, so they are somewhat dangerous and not easy to obtain." Yan spoke eloquently, and at the end, he asked with some curiosity, "I wonder if your tribe has such a distinctive-looking plant." As he spoke, he turned to look at Green Spot. Green Spot understood and quickly took out a small blade of grass, about the height of a palm, from its storage bag. The tender green grass looked like a calic, emitting a faint green fluorescence. Su Yun immediately felt that it looked familiar. There were such fluorescent plants near the corpse of the god of ice. He thought for a moment and decided to take these people over to identify it, saying calmly, "Follow me." After saying that, he turned and led the way. Yan and his group of 5 exchanged a glance, a flash of joy crossing their eyes. Could it really be true? The group of nearly 20 people headed towards the edge of the tribe. Along the way, Su Yun pondered the words spoken by the man named Yan, then noticed the word ordinary. That meant there were other possibilities. "I'll ask later." Soon, he led these people to the place where the god of ice had fallen. The Yanhuang tribesmen marveled at the glowing grass. "This is..." Yan and his group of 5 had only glanced at it once when they saw the piles of divinely bestowed plants, and were momentarily stunned. However, after careful examination, they couldn't help but beat their chests in regret. Yan looked at the fluorescent wild grass with immense pity. "What's wrong?" Su Yun noticed the expressions of the 5 and asked. "Sigh." Yan sighed, looking at the priest and replying, "These are indeed divinely bestowed plants, but..." He paused, then shook his head regretfully, "But these are all wild grasses. If you're not lucky enough to find them edible, eating them will have the opposite effect on your health. Some wild grasses are also highly poisonous. Only those divinely bestowed plants that are edible are truly valuable." Su Yun seemed thoughtful, pondering for a moment. "You mentioned before that under normal circumstances, there are other ways to obtain these plants." After thinking for a moment, he added meaningfully, "You should have guessed by now that this is the place where the god of ice fell, and these wild grasses have been tainted by divine blood." Yan and the other 4 showed expressions of certainty, but thinking of his question, they hesitated again. However, after a final thought, Since the secret of divine blood had been discovered, this tribe would eventually discover a way to cultivate divinely bestowed plants, so they might as well just continue selling them. Yan and the other four exchanged glances, and finally Yan spoke up. The priest is indeed wise. There is another method. After offering a compliment, he explained, besides wild ones, the rest of the divinely bestowed plants are obtained through the great gods. They rely on their powerful divine strength and divine blood to baptize the plants. This way, even ordinary plants can become divinely bestowed plants after baptism. Oh, Su Yun pondered, thinking to himself, that's about what I guessed. After seeing that divine blood could change plants, he naturally thought of using divine power, but he hadn't had time to test it yet, otherwise he would have discovered this secret sooner or later. Unfortunately, suddenly, Yan sighed. Seeing the puzzled looks on everyone's faces, he explained to them, divinely bestowed plants are easy to obtain through baptism, the most difficult thing is to make those plants edible. Upon hearing this, the other four echoed his sentiments. That's right, our tribe has been searching for a long time. There are only a few ordinary plants that are edible without causing discomfort. However, most of the wild, divinely bestowed plants protected by mythical beasts are edible, so we've been searching for them. Hearing this, Su Yun's lips involuntarily curled upwards, even with his usual composure. Edible plants were something no one in the other world would attempt, but in modern times, there was so much of this food that it could flood a tribe. Divinely bestowed plants. If ginseng and other medicinal herbs could become divinely bestowed plants, the effect. Su Yun couldn't help but think of the various plants in the real world, especially those medicinal herbs, and even ordinary rice could become divine rice. Then, would the Yanhuang tribe still lack divinely bestowed plants? Wouldn't they become powerful? Thinking of this, his mood improved considerably, and his gaze towards the five people softened. However, he still needed to probe some things, such as the number of people in their tribe. And after this incident, he guessed that these five people's tribe might have already begun farming, but he didn't know if they had a staple food like rice. If they did, then the other tribe's population would be like a population limiter that had been lifted, absolutely not to be underestimated. And population is equivalent to the strength of a god. He guessed that the god of this tribe was at least a level 3 god. However, he wasn't disappointed, because he believed that with so many advantages, given time to develop, the Yanhuang tribe could definitely surpass this tribe. After thinking all this, Su Yun said regretfully, that's a real pity. If these wild grasses are useless, then I really don't know when our tribe will be able to obtain divinely bestowed plants. Yan Wu nodded with a sigh, clearly agreeing with this viewpoint, and was directly persuaded. Su Yun continued, since our Yanhuang tribe doesn't have divinely bestowed plants, it seems the trade can't continue. This time he was genuinely disappointed. He had originally wanted to see if they would trade their storage bags. No, Yan shook his head and retorted, could we be allowed to visit your tribe? Perhaps we'll find what we need inside. Yes, Green Spot chimed in from the side, your gods are so powerful, your tribe must have some special features, perhaps exactly what we need. Upon hearing this, Su Yun gave them a deep look. Yan and Green Spot immediately felt as if they had been seen through, and cold sweat involuntarily broke out on their backs. We've been seen through? It seems that with such a shrewd priest around, it will be extremely difficult for us to gain any advantage. Yan and the others sighed inwardly. However, just when they thought they would be refused, Su Yun suddenly smiled slightly. Yes, what did you say? The five of them, who had thought they would be refused, immediately became overjoyed. I'll show you around. Su Yun didn't repeat his answer, turned around and gave an order, leaving behind the spears and stones of the dozen or so Yanhuang tribesmen who had come with him, and then led the way. Yan and the other five exchanged a glance and quickly followed. As Su Yun led the way, he glanced back at the five people behind him and casually asked, five traveling merchants, is your tribe very powerful? You have so many divinely bestowed plants. This seemingly exclamatory remark caused the eyes of all five merchants, except Yan, to light up. Green Spot eagerly stepped forward, his face beaming with pride, and declared, of course. Our fire god tribe is a large tribe with over 10,000 members. Spear and Stone looked at him in surprise. Su Yun mentally scoffed at the tribe's name before falling into thought. Although he had anticipated the fire god tribe size, hearing the number still put him under some pressure. However, he wasn't discouraged. Instead, he felt a new goal to strive for. Yan and the other three felt a surge of pride and honor upon hearing Green Spot's words. Su-yoon could see that these 5 were genuinely proud of their tribe, indicating that their living conditions were quite good, enough to meet the basic needs of even a 10,000-member tribe, thus fostering a sense of belonging. TCH, a disdainful voice suddenly rang out. Yan Wu and his companions frowned and turned to look at the speaker. What's so great about them? Shi Tao curled his lip, giving Yan Wu a proud glance. One day our tribe will be just as powerful. Even stronger than yours. Su-yoon's lips curled slightly, and he gestured to Mao, who was about to speak, to be quiet. What did you say? Yan Wu and his companions seemed offended, their expressions showing anger and dissatisfaction. Among the 5, an 18-year-old boy named Dashu couldn't help but retort, I don't believe it. Your Yanhuang tribe only has 1,000 or 2,000 people at most. How could you possibly catch up with our fire god tribe? Our tribe has developed for 100 or 200 years, and only now have we reached the level of a large tribe with 10,000 people. Your Yanhuang tribe will at least need to be like us, and it will definitely take several hundred years of development to catch up. By then, our tribe will definitely be even stronger. HMPH, Yan Wu and his companions' faces were full of disbelief, their eyes revealing contempt and arrogance. Clearly, in the minds of the 5, their tribe was the most powerful, and absolutely not one that could be easily caught up with. Whether from a factual or objective standpoint, the idea of the Yanhuang tribe catching up with their Huishan tribe within a century seemed impossible to them. They dismissed it as mere nonsense and wishful thinking. Then just wait and see. Stone's face flushed with anger, his eyes reddening, but he still stubbornly insisted, under the leadership of the great god of light, our tribe will surpass you sooner or later. The 5 men frowned, wanting to retort. However, at this moment, Su-yoon, who was leading the way, suddenly interrupted them. We're here. As they walked towards the center of the tribe, the trees gradually thinned out. Soon, a large open space appeared. The 5 men turned their gaze away from Stone and looked around. A dozen neat and tidy block houses appeared in the 8 men's view. Su-yoon and the other 2 didn't react, but the 5 men who had followed opened their mouths slightly. These are houses, Yan exclaimed instinctively, looking at the neat and orderly houses that exuded an artistic atmosphere. So beautiful. The other 4 glanced at them with critical eyes, but in the end, they had to admit that the houses of this tribe did indeed look more beautiful than those of their own. Their fire god tribe's houses were built by cutting off the upper half of a tree, using the tree as the central trunk, and then cutting other wood for support. The roofs were made of dried straw and branches. Originally, they thought their houses were already perfect, far superior to those of other tribes, but now, after seeing the houses of the Yanhuang tribe, they suddenly realized that houses could be built like this, and could be so neat and beautiful. What do you think? Not bad, right? Seeing their expressions, Stone raised his chin proudly and said, these were taught to us by the great gods, aren't they beautiful? What's so special about this? The big tree wanted to retort, but its voice unconsciously weakened. His face flushed slightly. Although he tried to refute, the thought that their houses were indeed inferior to those of this tribe made him less confident and filled him with a sense of loss. It was unbelievable that the houses they had developed over hundreds of years were inferior to those of this small tribe. Yan and the other 3 shared similar feelings, their emotions complex. However, they then thought that since their god had taught them these houses, it was normal for them to live in such dwellings. Aside from envy, they didn't see anything wrong with it. If it was done by a god, anything was possible. Gods were synonymous with omnipotence, and as believers in gods, they never questioned this. Indeed, this god is very special, Yan thought to himself. He felt that a god who could defeat the god of ice must be special, and now he had indeed discovered something special. Suddenly, he turned his head and saw the Yanhuang tribesmen building wooden houses in the distance, and his eyes lit up. Yan immediately turned to the priest. Priest, can you sell your tribe's house building methods? We can trade with you. The other 4's eyes lit up. Yes, they could trade. If they learned how to build wooden houses, wouldn't they be able to live in such houses too? This was something beneficial to their tribe, making it more prosperous. They were willing to pay any price to obtain the method. Oh, Su-yoon looked at Yan in surprise, not expecting him to want the house building method. Under the expectant gazes of the 5, he pondered. The 5 waited quietly, not disturbing him. The priest's thoughtful expression made their eyes light up, knowing there might be a chance. Should we trade? Su-yoon thought to himself, considering the pros and cons of trading the building method. There weren't any disadvantages, at most others would live in the same houses as their tribe, reducing the rarity. but that wasn't a big deal. To be honest, if the materials for wooden houses weren't easy to obtain, he wouldn't have considered it in the first place. Don't be fooled by the log cabin's beautiful appearance and coolness in summer. Its shortcomings become glaringly obvious in winter. It's cold. In modern times, this wouldn't be a problem. You could just add a few more quilts, but in primitive society, there were no quilts. Living in a log cabin was less comfortable than living in a cave. In his plan, the log cabin would definitely be phased out before winter arrived, replaced by brick and mud houses like those in rural areas. Especially since they could have a fire pit, preventing the cold from seeping in during winter. So, the log cabin was going to be phased out sooner or later. It was something he disliked and didn't want, but it was good to reuse it. However, he shouldn't be so picky. These 5 people didn't know that. They would only see it as a valuable item. Since that's the case, then don't blame me for taking a little something from you. Su-Yun looked at the 5 people, a gentle smile on his face, kind and benevolent. Yan and the other 5 looked at the priest's smile, and for some reason, despite the seemingly benevolent smile, they felt a chill run down their spines. Please give me some votes. I don't have enough recommendation votes. I don't know when I'll be able to break 10,000. Chapter 70, The Salt Jar. What can you offer in exchange for the construction method? Su-Yun asked softly. A look of surprise flashed across the 5 men's eyes, and Yan quickly replied, "We're willing to trade you a bag of divine fruits." With that, he took out a bag from his waist and emptied it. With a rustling sound, a half-meter-tall divine fruit appeared on the ground. Su-Yun examined it carefully and found more than 10 different kinds of fruit, indicating that this fire god tribe possessed at least a dozen divine plants. As he looked, a crucial question suddenly occurred to him. Paying attention to the divine fruits, he frowned and asked, "Didn't you say divine plants are very precious? Aren't you afraid I'll cultivate these fruits?" It was because of this thought that he was puzzled by the 5 men's generosity. He didn't think these traveling merchants would be so generous. "Priest, you're overthinking it." Yan Yat paused for a moment, then smiled. Apart from wild divinely bestowed plants blessed by the gods, whether they sprout or grow, require nourishment from the same divine power or the power of believers. Otherwise, they won't sprout. Even if they sprout, without nourishment, they'll eventually wither, and these fruits have all been blessed by our flame god. Apart from the god and us believers, anyone else who plants them will get nothing in the end. This explanation made Su-Yun realize why these 5 people were so generous. They must have known that apart from the flame god and his believers, there was no other way for the fruits to sprout. However, after thinking about it, he wasn't disappointed. On the contrary, he thought it was a good thing. When he returned to the real world and converted the plants, he could foresee that he would have many divinely bestowed plants in the future. If someone else picked the peaches for him then, he would be in for a lot of tears. This situation was perfect. Su-Yun nodded, then lowered his head to carefully sense the fruits, frowning slightly. The energy is very low. It seems it won't have much effect on the divine body. While observing the divine fruits, he was drawn to the bottles and jars nearby. Small, brown earthenware jars, about the size of a palm, were piled up next to the fruits. "What's inside?" Su-Yun asked, pointing to the jars. Yan looked at the jars and explained, "These jars contain salt." Su-Yun was secretly surprised. "Can I take a look?" "Sure," Yan readily agreed. "You can also exchange it if you need it." Su-Yun picked up a crudely made small earthenware jar and removed the lid with his right hand. He looked inside. Blackish yellow. Su-Yun looked at the salt, his lips twitching involuntarily. Compared to modern snowflake salt, the salt from the Vulcan tribe was not only coarse but also had a strange color. He knew that salt from different producing areas would have different colors, but this definitely didn't include the salt from the Vulcan tribe. It was purely due to too many impurities and pollution. Su-Yun could easily see that the salt granules contained black mud and other impurities, clearly indicating they hadn't been properly purified. He looked at them with growing disdain, just as the traveling merchant, Green Spot, spoke up. "This is salt produced by our tribe, isn't it beautiful? This salt has many uses. You can coat it on meat, and the food can be stored until winter without spoiling." He smiled proudly, introducing the salt's abilities. It is indeed quite good." Su-Yun's expression turned somewhat strange upon hearing this, barely suppressing a laugh. "How much are these?" he asked, feigning curiosity. "If you want them, these divine fruits can be exchanged for 3 jars of salt," Yan Shenshin said thoughtfully. Su-Yun looked at the salt, then unconsciously glanced at the divine fruits, marveling at the difference in value between the two. This jar of salt, with so many impurities, could actually compare to these divine fruits. Although the divine fruits contain very little energy, this was enough to prove the salt's considerable value. Could it be that appearances can be deceiving? Maybe this salt is special. Thinking this, after getting permission, Su-Yun dipped a small amount in and tasted it. Is it alright? Yan Wu and the others watched him with shining eyes, hoping for praise and exclamations of amazement. In the past, when they visited other tribes, everyone who tasted their salt praised it highly. In their minds, the priest would be no exception and would surely be conquered by the salt of their fire god tribe. As soon as the salt entered his mouth, Su-Yun's eyes widened. Bitter. Such bitter salt, the saltiness was mixed with bitterness, the bitterness completely ruining the saltiness, making it neither salty nor bitter. Looking at the expectant faces of Yan Wu, Su-Yun frowned tightly, holding back for a long time before refraining from saying anything hurtful. It's not good. His furrowed brows left the five of them astonished. Clearly, they hadn't expected that this usually invincible salt wouldn't satisfy the tribal priest's appetite. But how could this be? Their tribe's salt was already considered quite good. They were deeply puzzled. It's alright, Su-Yun replied vaguely. This obviously didn't satisfy Yan and the other four. As people who always held their tribe's possessions in high esteem, they were naturally dissatisfied with this answer. Your Yan Huron tribe? You wouldn't happen to have better salt than ours, would you? Yan guessed something and asked in surprise. The other four were also startled, their first reaction being disbelief. Impossible, how could there be better salt than ours? They began to argue and refute, clearly not believing that the Yan Huron tribe had better salt than their fire god tribe. Su-Yun watched them argue speechlessly. It's just salt, what's there to fight over? But his silence seemed like an admission, causing the five of them to frown even more. Seeing that ignoring this might affect him, Su-Yun spoke up directly, I don't want these divine fruits and salt. Can this storage item be traded? Neither the divine fruits nor the salt were of much use to the tribe. His initial goal was to obtain this storage item. A storage bag. Yan and the other five subconsciously looked down at the green bag. After their initial surprise, their expressions were filled with difficulty. It cannot be traded, Su-Yun frowned. I'm sorry, Yan sighed directly. However, fearing that Su-Yun would misunderstand, he quickly held up the light green bag and explained, Priest, don't be fooled by its ability to store items, it's actually the fruit of a divinely bestowed plant. Su-Yun was slightly taken aback, staring at the bag carefully for several moments. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 71 Trading with Modern Goods. Upon closer inspection, it was undeniable that the pouch, though oddly shaped, did indeed appear to be the fruit of a plant. The broken part, if examined closely, even showed a faint mark. This is a plant blessed by our tribe's fire god. No one but members of our tribe can cultivate it, Yan explained helplessly. Even if we wanted to give it to you, there's no way. Su-Yun shook his head, unsure what to say besides regret. Since this storage pouch couldn't be traded, these traveling merchants had nothing that would interest him. Seeing Su-Yun's regretful expression, Yan and the other three felt a pang of unease. Brother Yan, Green Spot said nervously, hesitant to speak. He was fed up with his old house. This new wooden cabin immediately caught his eye, and he didn't want the deal to fall through. Moreover, he knew that their tribe had discovered this divinely bestowed plant in the wild, and they certainly had wild seeds. He could simply exchange any one for it. Let me think about it, Yan said, noticing the expressions of Green Spot and the others, knowing they were inclined towards a trade. However, this matter not only concerned them but also the interests of the tribe. Although the wooden house would benefit the tribe's development, in his opinion, its value was not enough to offset the cost. Su-Yun, deep in thought to himself, there's a chance. After a moment of silence, Yan suddenly gritted his teeth and looked at Su-Yun seriously, saying, Priest, our tribe still has some wild storage bag seeds left, but, Su-Yun's eyes lit up, and seeing his hesitant expression, he immediately understood. What are your requirements? The method of building the wooden house isn't valuable enough, Yan said without hesitation. If you want it, you must add other valuable items. After he finished speaking, the 4 green spots looked at the priest nervously, afraid that he wouldn't be able to come up with anything else of value. Oh, Su-Yun was not troubled at all. Instead, he smiled. There weren't many other things, but weren't there many valuable things? Putting aside everything else, he thought that the method of starting a fire by friction was worth the price, or even more, since fire was definitely not as convenient as starting a fire by friction. And besides that, any other modern knowledge he could offer would be enough to surprise these 5 people. However, after thinking for a moment, he decided to give them something they were familiar with, so they could easily assess its value. Wait a moment, I'll go get something for you to see, Su-Yun smiled. After saying this, he instructed Mao and Shitao, then turned and left. On his way, Su-Yun walked while his divine body was swallowed by a black vortex in the divine stone space. He was going back to the modern world to get something. What did your priest go to get? Dashu asked curiously. The other 4 were also very curious, wondering if the Yanhuan tribe, which had surprised them so much, could bring out something that would impress them. Although they had some expectations, they didn't have too much. As traveling merchants, they were well-traveled and experienced. It would be very difficult to find something that would be acceptable and desirable to them. Therefore, they didn't have high hopes. We don't know either, Mao shook his head, indicating that he didn't know. Without receiving an answer, the 5 of them could only wait helplessly, casually observing the Yanhuan tribe. During the wait, tribesmen would occasionally stop and look at them curiously. As time passed, more than 10 minutes quickly went by. Then, they saw the priest approaching from afar, carrying a white object. Su-Yun held a small white porcelain bowl in his right hand, filled with something as delicate as snowflakes. He made way for the dozens of tribespeople watching and walked up to Yanqi. Priest, what is this? It's so beautiful. Stone's eyes lit up as he looked in amazement at the small bowl in his hand and the snow-white substance inside. This is, Yan Wu noticed the small bowl and was also surprised. The small bowl was snow-white and smooth, smoother than anything they had ever seen. Just imagining it made them know it would feel wonderful to the touch. Especially since the entire bowl was white, it added to its purity, making it look like a precious jewel. Yan Wu indeed thought so too. In their tribe, where food was plentiful, they value these kinds of unusual things even more. The important figures in the tribe especially liked such things, displaying them at home to show off when guests came. The moment they saw this thing, they felt an overwhelming sense of determination to possess it. As long as we offer this to the priest or the chief, or even to the gods, they will definitely like it, and we will surely be highly valued, Yan and the others thought excitedly. As for the snow-white thing in the bowl, they ignored it because they didn't recognize what it was. In their minds, salt should be multicolored. They didn't even think about something snow-white like this, and didn't associate it with salt at all, assuming it was something else entirely. Even if they were told that it was salt, their first reaction would definitely be skepticism. Su-Yun opened his mouth to introduce the salt, but before he could speak, "Priest, is this what you want to trade?" Yan asked impatiently. "If it is, then we'll take it. This thing is really nice." Yes, Dashu and the others also praised it. Even the other Yanhuan tribesmen who were watching praised it. "Priest, where did you get this? This thing is very beautiful. We want it too." Su-Yun heard the crowd's words, and his mouth, which was about to speak, closed, and even twitched slightly. His expression stiffened as he thought in surprise, they can treat an ordinary white porcelain bowl like a treasure. Thinking this, he subconsciously looked down at the bowl. It's still that ordinary white porcelain bowl. Looks like it's not me who's acting strangely, it's them. Su-Yun tightly shut his mouth, barely managing to suppress a laugh. Glancing at the expectant expressions on Yan and the other three's faces, he coughed a few times. I think you've misunderstood something. What I want to trade isn't the bowl, but what's inside." He pointed strangely at the snowflake salt. They really were blind to its value, ignoring perfectly good salt right in front of them. Yan and the other 3 were initially disappointed, then looked at the fine, white, sand-like substance with some confusion. "What is this?" "It's salt," Su-Yun said calmly, directly uttering the words that left the 5 stunned. 70-second transaction. "This is salt." Yan and the other 5 people gaped, their faces filled with disbelief. Salt? It was so white and fine. It looked like it had no impurities whatsoever, but how could this be possible? Su-Yun, of course, had seen the expected skepticism, and he didn't explain further to their disbelieving expressions. "If you don't believe me, you can try it," he said, placing the salt in front of the 5 people. Looking at the snow-white substance, the 5 exchanged glances, and finally each reached out and took a small amount. After a moment's hesitation, Yan was the first to put the snowflake salt into his mouth. As soon as it entered his mouth, as the fine salt melted, a pure, unpleasant salty taste immediately assaulted his taste buds. In that instant, his eyes widened, and he looked down at the bowl of snowflake salt, stunned. This was the best salt he had ever tasted. No, it was also the most beautiful salt. How is it? Dashu and the other 4, who were waiting nearby, noticed his confused expression and asked urgently. "Shucked," Yan said in a strange tone, "you'll know once you try it." Hearing Yan's words, the 4 green-spotted men were puzzled and quickly put the snowflake salt into their mouths. As soon as the snowflake salt melted, they all widened their eyes, their expressions mirroring Yan's. "What kind of salt is this? It doesn't taste strange at all. There really is salt better than our tribes?" the 4 exclaimed in surprise, looking at the snowflake salt in their bowls with disbelief. At the same time, they couldn't help but recall the priest's expression when they talked about salt earlier. "So it really is. The priest was just too lazy to argue with us." Thinking of the priest's indifferent demeanor and their foolish arguing and disbelief, they couldn't help but feel ashamed and embarrassed. If this was the salt, even with their high standards, they had to admit that, whether in appearance or in the absence of any bitterness or strange taste, it completely surpassed their tribe's salt. They couldn't even find a way to win, because they were completely crushed. The Yanhuang people watching, though they didn't know what salt was, instinctively smiled upon hearing the 5 men's shocked words. At this moment, Yan stared intently at the priest, his eyes burning with fervor. "Excuse me, but may I ask where this salt comes from?" The other 4 also became excited. If they could get the method for making this salt. Suyun knew exactly what they were thinking, but unfortunately, without searching online, he didn't know the specific method either. Otherwise, even if he made it, it wouldn't be much better than theirs. Moreover, he didn't want to trade away the snowflake salt's manufacturing method, so he directly used the universal excuse, "This salt is a gift from the gods." Whether it was Yan and the others, or the other Yanhuang people, everyone was astonished. Yan and the others were somewhat dazed that it was a gift from the gods, but after a moment, they all understood. No wonder, it's a gift from the gods. They wondered why this salt was so special. If it was a gift from the gods, it made sense. Thinking it was a divine substance, their eyes burned even brighter as they gazed at the snowflake salt. Suyun chuckled and added, "Moreover, this salt has been processed by the gods. Not only does it taste wonderful, but it can also prevent certain diseases. For example, it can cure a thick neck." He thought for a moment and chose an example. "Yes, that's right. Processing? Don't ask, it's just that iodine has been added." Upon hearing this, Yan and the others were stunned. The thought of a thick neck brought back memories. As they thought about it, they were surprised to realize that some ordinary tribesmen in their tribe did indeed suffer from some unknown disease that caused their necks to become very thick. Moreover, in the early days of their tribe, those with this disease were discriminated against and ostracized by their tribesmen. It was only thanks to the intervention of the gods that they were not driven away. Although they were used to it now, the tribesmen with this disease were still very ashamed. Therefore, when they learned that this salt could cure the disease, their expressions were filled with excitement. At the same time, their determination to obtain the salt only intensified. Judging from their expressions, Suyun had a general idea of what to expect. "I wonder if this salt, combined with a method for building wooden houses, would be enough to exchange for your tribe's storage bag seeds." His words were barely out when the merchant's excitement was instantly dampened. Yan hesitated for a moment before saying, "It should be enough, but this requires our tribe's consent. Furthermore, we don't have the storage bag seeds with us. We have to return to the tribe to retrieve them, so I'm not sure if the tribe will actually agree." However, he paused, then glanced at the white porcelain bowl in Suyun's hand. "If you, priest, are willing to add this, then I'm absolutely confident I can make this happen." "That's right," Green Spot exclaimed excitedly from the side. "With the beauty of this, the important figures in the tribe will definitely love it. As long as we give it to them, we're confident we can get them to agree." Suyun looked at the burning desire in their eyes, his expression strange. "I didn't expect these people to still be so persistent, still wanting this little broken bowl, but since they want it, I have no reason to stop them. Anyway, it wasn't me who deliberately tricked them, Su-Yun asserted his innocence, proving he wasn't a cunning schemer. With that thought, he readily nodded, "You can have the bowl." Yan and the others, who had been preparing to patiently persuade them, were completely dumbfounded. What was going on? Shouldn't the priest refuse, then they have to plead and finally reluctantly agree? They were stunned for a moment. This is it," Green Spot stammered. Su-Yun calmly nodded, indicating they hadn't misheard. The five of them, Yan and Green Spot, wore expressions of immense satisfaction, all smiles. However, a moment later, they suddenly realized a problem. They hadn't brought the storage bag seeds with them, and to gain the tribe's approval, they would definitely need to take the white bowl and salt back to the tribe to show the important figures, otherwise the chances of the tribe agreeing were slim. At this, their expressions turned somewhat grim. Will the priest agree to this? Compared to before, this condition is even more outrageous. Anyone who didn't know better would think they were liars. They weren't sure the priest would agree. If they were in his shoes, they wouldn't agree to such an unreasonable request either. Thinking this, Yan finally spoke up with a bitter face. Immediately, a clamor arose. And the Anhuang people looked at them as if they were idiots. Are these guys crazy? They actually think they can take away the divine gifts so easily? That's right, the priest definitely won't agree. The Yanhuang people looked disdainful, convinced that these people were absolutely insane, otherwise why would they propose such an impossible thing? As expected, Yan and the other four exchanged glances, their faces filled with bitterness. "We are willing to leave the divine fruit and salt on us as collateral," Yan said somewhat uncertainly. In his mind, the white bowl and the white salt were definitely more valuable. Exchanging them would still be a bargain for them. He wasn't sure if the priest would agree to such a disadvantageous request. Chapter 73 Tribal Development in Progress. Hearing this answer, the Yanhuang people's expressions softened. Then, everyone's gaze focused on the priest. Seeing the hesitant expressions of Yan and his companions, and the looks in the eyes of the other tribesmen, Su-Yun was speechless. He hadn't even said anything yet, and these people had already left the items behind. Should he agree or disagree? Yes, Su-Yun thought for a moment, and finally agreed decisively. To others, it seemed he had struggled before agreeing. Yan and his companions became excited, while the Yanhuang people looked at them sharply with a mixture of pity and relief. They actually trust us so much? Yan sighed inwardly, feeling admiration and respect for the priest's magnanimity. He asked himself if it were him, he would never have given the items away, even with the divine fruits as collateral. After all, these divine fruits were of the lowest energy level and not very valuable. If Su-Yun knew their thoughts, he would definitely twitch his lips. It's just a bowl of salt in a porcelain bowl. How much could it be worth? If he actually gets the storage bag seed in the end, he'll have practically gotten something for nothing. Value is sometimes like that, sometimes it might be worthless, sometimes it might be priceless. It all depends on how you look at it. Clearly, what's commonplace in modern times, salt in a bowl, is a rare treasure to these primitive people. Su-Yun shook his head inwardly. After discussing the trade, the five traveling merchants, leaving behind a mountain of divine fruit and salt jars, took the white porcelain bowl and snowflake salt and gradually disappeared into the jungle under the watchful eyes of the Yanhuang tribe. I wonder when they'll be back. Judging from the information they gave, that tribe must be very far away. It'll probably take a long time for them to travel back and forth, Su-Yun said with some emotion. However, he also believed that the five would definitely return. For traveling merchants, reputation is paramount. If word got out that they'd taken the goods and run, no one would dare trade with them anymore. Besides, it was just salt in a small bowl, nothing precious that would tempt anyone to greed. The other party wouldn't risk offending a divine tribe for this. And indeed, things turned out as he suspected. There were other large tribes surrounding the fire god tribe, and if those tribes knew what they had done, they certainly wouldn't hesitate to kick them while they were down, to damage the fire god tribe's reputation. By the time these people return, my tribe should be completely different, Su-Yun said with a sigh. Because of the ice tribe, he hadn't been able to properly develop his tribe until now. Now, in this peaceful period, he believed the tribe would experience rapid growth. He had plenty of confidence and strength. 5 traveling merchants walked slowly through the jungle. The leader, Yan, exclaimed in amazement, "I never expected we'd have such a harvest this time. When we return, we'll offer these 2 items to the priest and the chief, We'll definitely be rewarded. Yes, Brother Yen, we're really lucky, Green Spot agreed with a grin. Among the five, a robust young man in his early 20s named Dazhuang suddenly asked with some doubt, Brother Yen, have you noticed that tribe seems to have very few people, with such a small tribe? How did that god defeat the god of ice and even possess so many treasures that our tribe doesn't have? These questions had been swirling in his mind. After being reminded by him, Dashu, Levben, and another person named Huang Tu also had these questions in their minds. Yan pondered for a moment and guessed, actually, I've had a guess about this for a while now. I guess that Yan Huang tribe migrated from elsewhere. Their tribe may have suffered some kind of disaster, which is why their population has drastically decreased. That would explain why their god is so strong and they have so many treasures. I see. Ben and the other three suddenly understood, and after a moment's thought, they all agreed with this explanation. That makes sense. After saying this, the group of five continued their journey back towards the distant fire god tribe. Suyun of the Yanhuang tribe sat on a gray rock, pondering the tribe's future development plans. Just then, footsteps sounded, interrupting his thoughts. Suyun turned his head. Priest, something bad has happened. Stone ran over, his expression tense. That guy the god sent to keep an eye on, he's dead. That prisoner of the Frost tribe is dead, Suyun asked, somewhat surprised. How did he die? Stone scratched his head, looking hesitant. The guard said he seems to have committed suicide. Suyun thought for a moment and immediately understood. Presumably, with the death of the Frost god, and the fact that the man was basically crippled, his will to live was low, so suicide was perfectly normal. Priest, what should we do? Won't the gods blame us? Stone nervously gripped his animal skin trousers. Suyun glanced at him with amusement, then closed his eyes briefly. A dozen seconds later, he opened them. The gods just told me that the man's time to die had come, so it's not your fault, don't worry. Suyun calmly began his self-directed drama. I must say, this feels pretty good. Upon hearing this, Stone breathed a sigh of relief. Then, priest, I'm off. He waved and ran off with a grin. Suyun shook his head and began to think again. A while later. Let's make ceramics. Suyun suddenly thought of the rough pottery jars left behind by the traveling merchants from the fire god tribe. With ceramics, I can teach them how to cook. Suyun stroked his chin. Ceramics have high fire resistance, so they can definitely cook food over a fire. Moreover, ceramics can hold water and food, which would be very beneficial for the tribe's development. Having decided, Suyun stood up from Stone and started walking towards the river, requesting recommendation votes and monthly tickets. Do any big shots still have investment opportunities? Ahem. Investment is almost over 100, want to break the 100. Chapter 74, Pottery Making. Reaching the riverbank, Suyun examined the soil, then squatted down and kneaded it. It was soft, slightly sticky, and appeared to have few impurities. The soil is alright, passable. He only intended to make ordinary pottery, so there was no need to pursue better soil. He'd hone his pottery making skills first, and deal with the soil later. However, once he was skilled in pottery, he would need to choose kaolin clay for porcelain, otherwise, he wouldn't be able to make it. He wondered if the traveling merchants, seeing everyone carrying a piece of porcelain, would be so angry they'd break their own bodies. Having chosen his soil, Suyun walked a little further from the riverbank and selected a spot. With a wave of his hand, a white flame rose into the air. The flame landed. Soon after, a circular pit, 1 meter deep and 2 meters wide, appeared. A flame excavator, quite effective, much faster than a vocational school graduate. Suyun was satisfied. It was best to avoid manual labor if possible. After retracting the white flame, he used ordinary white light again. White light seeped into the ground, and then a magical scene unfolded. The soil rose up from the earth. Suyun controlled the soil to deform into an inverted long bowl shape, with a notch at the front and an upward-pointing chimney at the top. The large bowl covered the pit. Done, simple and quick, he couldn't help but marvel at the convenience of divine power. After speaking, Suyun left the place and returned to the tribe to gather people. Soon, at his command, some of the idle tribesmen were gathered, about 50 or 60 people. Looking at the priest standing in front, Stone in the crowd asked in confusion, "Priest, what do you need us for? Follow me." Suyun didn't say much and directly led the way. Upon arriving at their destination, the group looked at the strangely shaped mud structure and were all surprised and puzzled. Priest, what is this? Stone stared at the kiln with curiosity. This is a pottery kiln. You saw the jars those 5 people were carrying before, right? That's pottery, Su-Yun explained calmly. The gods saw it and specifically told me how to make it. I think you'll need it. Upon hearing this, everyone became excited. So the priest is going to teach us this. Great, thank God. Their eyes shone with excitement. In truth, the tribespeople had all felt a longing when they saw those pottery jars. Before, they could only use large leaves to hold water and other things, so they desperately wanted those jars that could hold things. But knowing they weren't theirs, they forced themselves to suppress their desire. Now, knowing that the priest had received divine revelation and could make those things, everyone was energized, watching the priest intently, afraid of missing a single detail. Su-Yun was pleased with their serious expressions. He turned to 3 people and instructed them, go and get some firewood. As soon as he finished speaking, the 3 hurriedly headed towards the woods. A short while later, the 3 returned, each carrying a large pile of firewood. Under Su-Yun's command, they laid dry firewood and some accelerants at the bottom of the pit. Then, after instructing them to continue gathering firewood, Su-Yun led the remaining people to the riverbank. You should know what that jar looks like. Use this mud to mold it into that shape, Su-Yun instructed, pointing to the clay on the riverbank. Ah! Playing with mud! Shitao exclaimed with delight. Some of the children in the crowd, similarly excited, perked up. They were certainly experienced at playing with mud. The adults, however, looked somewhat embarrassed. They couldn't understand why the priest wanted them to play with mud. Could mud really be transformed into that jar? It can't really be done, can it? I can't imagine mud being shaped like that. With their limited knowledge, they couldn't fathom how the mud would harden even if it did resemble a jar. Filled with skepticism, they squatted down by the riverbank, each scooping up a large lump of wet clay. Time passed. Su-Yun's lips twitched as he looked at the masterpieces in the hands of these people. Almost everyone's work on the deformed pottery jars was a mess, with the men's being the worst, followed by the women's. Most surprisingly, the children's work was unexpectedly better. Although still substandard, they were at least in basic shape. With more time, the children would surely finish the clay blanks. Half an hour later, Su-Yun sighed. He felt that it would be ages before they produced a decent one. Forget it, I'll do it myself. Once the first batch is made and they have experience, they'll have plenty of time to learn. Thinking this, Su-Yun drew the attention of the tribespeople who were engrossed in playing with the mud. Dozens of people stopped what they were doing and looked at the priest. I'll do it, Su-Yun shook his head. The tribespeople felt a pang of embarrassment and awkwardness. A white light appeared in Su-Yun's hand, and the tribespeople's expressions brightened, revealing expressions of envy. This was divine power, and everyone yearned for it. The white light seeped into the clay. Then, a scene defying the laws of physics unfolded. The clay began to float. Exclamations erupted. Su-Yun ignored them, focusing his attention on the clay. Recalling the shapes of the pottery jars he had seen before, he had a thought, and the clay began to transform. Guided by his thoughts and the white light, the clay slowly transformed into exquisitely shaped pottery jars. Enveloped in the white light, 9 pottery jar blanks floated. Looking at the exquisite pottery jars in Su-Yun's hands, the tribespeople subconsciously looked down at the strange objects in their own hands, all feeling embarrassed. Compared to the priests, theirs really was just mud. These pottery jar blanks were astonishing. Some observant people even noticed that these pottery jars were far more beautiful than those of the fire god tribe. Next, we need to dry them, Su-Yun pondered. Thinking this, he looked up at the sky. The sky overhead was clear and blue, and the golden sunlight of near midday shone down. However, it was the autumn sun, and although the sunlight was a bit hot, the temperature wasn't too high. A bit slow, who knows how long it will take to dry everything? Thinking this, he scanned the sunlight. Then suddenly his eyes narrowed slightly, and an idea popped into his head. Try it. Su-Yun focused his mind on the sunlight, and with a strange intuition, he commanded in his mind, gather. Chapter 75. Several new move ideas. The tribesmen, who had been wondering what he was looking at, suddenly froze. The sky above them had suddenly darkened, as if the sun had been obscured by clouds. They instinctively looked up at the sky, but saw not a single cloud. Their shock didn't last long before they noticed something. The sunlight above the priest seemed abnormally bright, a golden expanse. They were dumbfounded. Success! Su-Yun's lips curled into a slight smile. He concentrated the sunlight within a 10-meter radius, like a magnifying glass, instantly making the sun above the pottery jar much more intense, like being in a desert, incredibly scorching. This was only because he was afraid of burning the pottery jar, otherwise, he felt he could have expanded the area even further. I wonder where the limit is. If I concentrated it all into one point, the power would be quite impressive, wouldn't it? Su-Yun watched the moisture on the pottery jar evaporate rapidly, his mind already conjuring up new techniques. He discovered that while this technique lacked the physical destructive power of the golden wheel, it consumed very little divine power, less than even the power required to condense a golden lightsaber. Furthermore, the ability to gather sunlight sparked several other vague ideas within him. A flashbang, completely stripping away all light and then releasing it in an instant. Just as this idea crossed his mind, his thoughts drifted again. If this were practiced to its limit, the world would be plunged into darkness. Walking in this darkness, he would softly proclaim, "The world should have light." Su-Yun coughed a few times, feeling somewhat embarrassed, but the thought that it was indeed a good technique made him unable to resist the urge to try and develop it. "I'll teach my people pottery first," he said, suppressing his impatience as he glanced at the unfinished pottery. "It'll take some more time," Su-Yun silently calculated, then turned to tell his people to stop playing with the mud and waited patiently. Half an hour passed. Looking at the unfinished pottery, its color changed by the loss of moisture, he disconnected the divine power maintaining the sunlight. In an instant, the sky returned to normal. Su-Yun turned and called for his people to follow, then strode forward. The group, who had been playing in the mud, paused, then hurriedly followed out of curiosity. Upon reaching their destination, Su-Yun immediately saw a pile of dry firewood. Reaching the kill, he used his divine power to lift 9 pottery jars and place them on the firewood he had laid out, then continued to pile firewood around the jars. Just as Su-Yun was about to use his white flame to ignite the fire, he suddenly stopped. Try the previous technique, he thought, and the sky several dozen meters above him darkened again. The people were startled, but before they could even cry out, a dazzling spectacle appeared out of thin air. A golden pillar, about half the size of a fist, shot obliquely from the horizon, finally landing on the pile of firewood. Those near the golden pillar felt the surrounding temperature surge, and their bodies became somewhat uncomfortable. Crackling, as soon as the golden pillar touched the wood and dry leaves, flames immediately erupted. After removing the beam of light, Su-Yun looked at the blazing kiln and muttered to himself, "The power is alright, but it only controls sunlight within a 30 to 40 meter radius at most. And the concentration isn't enough." The beam of light, only half the size of a fist, clearly didn't meet his expectations. In his mind, it should be at least as thick as a little finger to complete the move. And if he could truly master it in the future, without expanding the range, the power would definitely increase several times over. The surrounding tribespeople were shocked, and an instinctive sense of fear arose within them. Su-Yun regained his composure. "You all stay here and guard the kill. If the flames weaken, add firewood. The flames must not go out or weaken before sunset." He turned to the 3 men gathering firewood and instructed them. "Yes," the 3 men nodded hastily in agreement. "As for you," Su-Yun glanced at the remaining dozens of people, "you continue practicing." Shi Tao and the others nodded hurriedly. Having arranged everything, Su-Yun left. As soon as the priest left, Shi Tao and the others gathered around the kiln, looking at the blazing fire inside with great curiosity. Then they began to discuss whether the pottery jar was really made of clay and whether the priest could succeed. "Do you think it's really possible to make a pottery jar? Since it's a method given by the gods, it must work." Leaving the crowd, Su-Yun's heart stirred, and he suddenly detached himself from this body. The old priest, who had been walking, paused, his eyes glazed over as he glanced around. He knew he might have fainted again, but he didn't panic. Instead, he remained calm. He had gotten used to being unconscious. Without any loss of composure, he went directly to a member of his tribe and subtly inquired about what had happened recently. After hearing the story, he gaped, thinking of the pottery jar that was being fired, and his whole body trembled with excitement. Pottery. That's a pottery jar, compared to his ignorant tribesmen. He, who had acquired a few pottery jars by chance before, was extremely familiar with them. Back then, he treasured those few pottery jars like precious gems, and was deeply disappointed and frustrated when they broke. Now, someone told him that his tribe had also learned how to make pottery jars. How could he not be excited? Having experienced the convenience of pottery jars, he knew that with them, his people's lives would definitely improve. Along with his joy, his reverence and piety towards a certain sacred figure deepened. He guessed that all of this must have been done by a great god. Of course, he only dared to think this in his heart, not daring to reveal it. After all, it was all just his conjecture, and to speak it aloud would be disrespectful to the gods. Inside the divine stone space, Su-Yun began experimenting with his techniques, extending his right palm. As his thoughts raced, the light within the divine stone space began to gather. A dazzling scene appeared. The light seemed to be swallowed by a black hole, strands converging from afar onto his palm. As a white ball of light appeared, the entire divine stone space plunged into darkness. Finally, even the ball of light in his hand stopped shining. The light was contained within the sphere, without a single leak. No, it failed. Su-Yun suddenly sighed. He knew it wouldn't be that simple. He discovered that while the surrounding light seemed to have been completely absorbed, that wasn't the case. A little bit remained. It was far from the absolute darkness he wanted. However, with practice, he could achieve that sooner or later. What truly troubled him was something else entirely. He discovered hidden lights. These lights were deeply embedded in objects, constantly emitting invisible light, which suddenly reminded him of some modern knowledge. Eliminating these lights seemed incredibly difficult. However, on the other hand, it also meant that if he could eliminate them all, he would definitely achieve true darkness. He also had a strange feeling that if he could truly gather all the light, there would be unexpected rewards. Thank you Sun Never Said 77 for the 100 Kidian coins reward. Thank you Promise Green Robe for the 100 reading points reward. Thank you. Please vote. Chapter 76, New Characters. Looks like there's another move I need to study. Su-Yun smiled helplessly, recalling the golden wheel and the sword of light, which were over 90% complete. As an invisible perfectionist, he couldn't tolerate even the slightest flaw. I'll finish those two first, then practice the new move. It shouldn't take too long. Thinking this, Su-Yun stretched out his palm, and a ball of white light began to gather, radiating golden light. As time passed, the practiced golden ball move became closer and closer to perfection, while the sky outside had already darkened. Over this period, the riverbank was full of potholes. Shi Tao looked up at the dim sky and stopped what he was doing. After a long period of playing with mud, they now had piles of various clay products around them, which were generally quite decent, except for some deformities, and were close to normal enough to be used to fire pottery. I'm so tired, I'm not doing this anymore. Let's go see if the kill has fired the pottery yet, Shi Tao called out to a young man in his late 20s. Let's go take a look. Qi, a muscular and honest-looking man, stopped his strenuous work and wiped the sweat from his brow with his arm. Okay, Qi nodded, washed his hands, stood up, and hurriedly followed Shi Tao. Seeing their actions, the other dozens of tribesmen, who had been working because it was getting dark, also stopped and followed one after another. They were also curious whether the clay, after being fired for so long, had truly turned into pottery, and whether such a miraculous transformation had really occurred. When they arrived at their destination, they saw the kiln still burning. Still burning, Shi Tao grumbled in dissatisfaction. Qi was also a little disappointed. It's almost done. The priest said we don't need to burn it tonight. You can come back tomorrow. The three of us are going back anyway. The three men guarding the kiln smiled. Alright. Disappointed, everyone had no choice but to return to their own houses before it got completely dark. Divine stone space. It's finished. The golden wheel in Su-Yun's hand had turned completely golden, and a smile involuntarily appeared on his face. Now that the flaw is gone, the power should be increased on the same basis. Huh? Suddenly, at the moment the golden wheel was completed, a strange feeling arose in his heart. Characters, Su-Yun's face showed a hint of surprise. He discovered that as long as he wanted, he seemed to be able to solidify the golden wheel technique directly into characters. This situation surprised him for a while. After calming down, he pondered. This situation also reminded him of the god of ice. Of the three divine arts that the other party used, apart from the blizzard, the other two were no wonder they were a bit ordinary. So that was the problem. It seems that when a technique is trained to a certain level, it can actually form characters. Should I solidify it? Su-Yun hesitated. Judging from the current situation, he might only have this one character left at the second level. If he solidified this one, he would have to advance to get more characters in the future. At the same time, whether to save this precious opportunity for his clansmen to imagine and form characters, or to use it now, These two choices put him in a dilemma. After thinking for a while, he gritted his teeth and decided to solidify the golden wheel as his strongest trump card move at present. This skill was indeed very powerful, but the 3-second casting time was a major drawback. If it were transformed into a character, there would be no casting time, allowing for instant activation, which would significantly boost his combat power. Thinking this, he solidified his decision to solidify the character. The moment the thought arose, he immediately followed his instincts and solidified it. In an instant, the divine space underwent a change, a fluctuation emanating from it. Suyun quickly shifted his attention to the divine space. In the divine space, 3 characters revolved around the divine caller. At first glance, he noticed the newly added blank transparent character. Suppressing his excitement, Suyun skillfully connected his consciousness to the character and activated it according to his instincts. A transparent thread shot out from the divine caller, instantly connecting with the character. At the same moment of connection, the character began to change, its bottom tinged with a different color. The orange color rapidly permeated the transparent character, quickly turning the entire character orange. However, the permeation didn't stop as soon as the orange color was achieved, a new color began to infiltrate the character. Yellow rapidly permeated, finally stopping at a point of about 40%. This scene caught Suyun's attention, and he remembered that he hadn't calculated how many followers a 3rd-level god needed for his last advancement. Taking advantage of the brief moment, he quickly glanced at it and calculated it. About 10,000 followers. Suyun rubbed his chin. As long as he gained another 5,000 followers, he could advance. Having calculated the required number for the next advancement, Suyun turned his attention back to the character. As before, he focused his consciousness on the character. He also received a piece of information. It was the 2 characters he had chosen himself, Golden Wheel. I wonder how effective it will be. Leaving the divine space, Suyun opened his eyes. With a wave of his hand, as if instinctively, he activated the golden wheel character within his body. Instantly, the divine power within his body surged, and in the blink of an eye, it dropped by 30%. Before Suyun could even frown, a golden sphere the size of a fist appeared directly beside him. Instant cast. Suyun's mind raced, and he extended his palm. The golden sphere swiftly moved into his hand. There's actually a feeling of mental connection. I feel like I can control the golden wheel at will. I definitely couldn't do this before. Sure enough, nothing in this world is simple, and how could it only have the advantage of instant cast? As if guided by divine inspiration, Suyun controlled the golden wheel with his mind. Instantly, the golden wheel began to transform. Square, swish. The golden wheel transformed into a square golden plate, instantly blocking his entire body. Suyun looked at the golden plate curiously and subconsciously punched it hard. Bang! A dull sound rang out. So hard, his punch was quite powerful, but the golden plate didn't deform at all. Moreover, he touched the golden plate and felt a warm touch. But he knew this was just a facade, like the terrifying heat of the golden wheel slash. While he himself was unaffected by touching it, it would be a different story for others. Having thought this through, he continued to control the golden plate, causing it to transform. Sword, blade. Finally, with a thought, Suyun transformed the golden wheel into a shield enveloping his entire body. Chapter 77, The Abnormal New Characters. But he had barely completed the shield, before he could even continue its transformation, when suddenly, the golden circular shield began to dissipate. It can't be maintained anymore. Suyun shook his head regretfully. From the moment the golden wheel transformed, its stable structure was destroyed. He was honestly surprised that it had lasted this long. He silently calculated that this period had lasted about 10 seconds, a significant increase compared to its previous duration. Overall, the golden wheel technique is a huge improvement, but the consumption is quite high. Using 30% of his divine power at a time, he would be overwhelmed after only 3 uses. Thinking this, Suyun began to try to reduce the consumption. As the experiment progressed, he finally concluded that forming the golden wheel required at least a little over 10% of his divine power, with a maximum of 30%. The power output varied depending on the amount of divine power consumed. Sensing his depleted divine power, Suyun activated the small black sphere. Releasing the restrictions, a surge of intense faith power rushed in, quickly replenishing his previously depleted divine power. Closing the small black sphere, Su Yun began to attempt a maximum execution. As he activated the characters, golden orbs suddenly appeared around him. 1, 3, 6, 9. When his divine power was more than 90% depleted, 9 golden orbs suddenly appeared around him. The 9 golden orbs swirled around him, creating a rather mysterious scene. Su Yun suddenly stretched out his hand, and as he clenched his fist, one of the swirling golden orbs immediately flew into his palm, its shape changing in the blink of an eye. In his palm, a slender golden scepter extended from both ends and was casually waved. Su Yun's expression was a bit strange, and he couldn't help but sigh. I feel a bit arrogant. Before, he thought he could easily crush anyone. With my current power, if these 9 golden wheels were to erupt, I really don't know who among my peers can withstand it. Even if they could, I still have the little black ball faith to replenish me. This has directly evolved into a monstrous level. I guess the opponent's mentality will collapse, right? Maybe they can even experience the thrill of being dominated and beaten by a cheater. No, I need to be steady. I can't get arrogant. Su Yun forcibly suppressed the smile on his lips. If I get too confident, I might really capsize in a ditch. After all, that's how everyone before me lost. I'm still very weak. I must work hard to become stronger so that I can continue to survive. Su Yun began a frantic self-suggestion. After a while, he finally adjusted his mindset and returned to his fighting spirit. Keep practicing my moves. I'm still a weakling. My talent can't compare to theirs, so I can only rely on hard work. I can't give those freaks any chance. Thinking this, he fell into diligent practice of his moves again. The next day, just as dawn broke, the morning light shone down from the horizon, fine dew clung to the plants, fresh air filled the tribe, and smoke occasionally rose from the tribe. Inside the divine stone space, Su Yun was practicing new moves. As for the Sword of Light, he had mastered it last night, but he didn't turn it into characters, feeling that turning this move into characters would be a waste. Rest for a while, then go check on the pottery jars we made yesterday. Su Yun's mind stirred. And the old priest, who had just gotten up, was plunged back into darkness before he could even react. After adjusting to his surroundings, he walked towards the kill. Upon reaching his destination, Su Yun was surprised to find a group of people already there, about a dozen. Seeing the priest approach, their eyes lit up. Without his command, they had been anxiously waiting to see, but dared not act rashly, and now they breathed a sigh of relief. The crowd parted, and Su Yun walked to the kill, peering into its dark interior. With a wave of his hand, he emitted a beam of white light, which enveloped the kill. Seeing this, the dozen or so people instinctively held their breath. They knew what the priest was doing, and a sense of tension and worry filled them. Whether the clay would turn into pottery jars depended on this moment. It must succeed, they prayed silently. Under their tense gazes, the white light lifted something from the kill. The yellowish-brown substance, tinged with gray, revealed its true form. Su Yun frowned, shaking the jar to remove most of the dust. Only then could everyone clearly see the true nature of the pottery jar. Haha, success! The clay really turned into pottery jars. The lingering disbelief in their hearts vanished completely. They looked at the 9 pottery jars, their faces showing surprise and joy. These 9 pottery jars, apart from their different styles, were similar in color to those from the fire god tribe, so they knew at a glance that it was a success. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed that ordinary clay, after such treatment, could become something of such value. Good luck, not a single one failed. Su Yun carefully examined the 9 pottery jars, and after finding no cracks or anything like that, he couldn't help but be surprised. A white light lifted the pottery jars and they landed on the ground. Seeing the eager looks in the eyes of his people, Su Yun found it somewhat amusing. You can touch it with your hands. As soon as he finished speaking, a dozen or so people rushed forward like children who had received a new toy, jostling and crowding together. Although their movements were rough, they handled the pottery jar very carefully. Once everyone had touched the hard pottery, their eyes lit up with astonishment. It's truly incomprehensible how some readily available clay can be transformed into something like this. Yes, if you ask me, it's the great God who is truly powerful. There's nothing that can stump the God. Indeed, they exclaimed in admiration and praise. Seeing that it was enough, Su Yun said calmly to them, whatever you want to make, you can make it now, and we'll put it all in to make pottery later. Upon hearing this, the dozen or so people were awe-stunned, followed by a series of earth-shattering exclamations. Really, priest, We really can. They looked at the priest nervously, somewhat uncertainly. The feeling of making something yourself is always different. They admired a priest's pottery jars, but when it came to actually making them, they felt a little nervous and lacked confidence. Suyun nodded slightly. Thank you, priest. Haha. I want to be the first. Shi Tao, a member of the crowd, laughed and ran quickly towards the river. The others, hearing this, became anxious and hurriedly followed after him. Suyun shook his head and slowly followed. He planned to teach the tribesmen to make some bowls and pottery pots so he could teach them how to cook later. Soon, with great enthusiasm, the tribesmen made a batch of small bowls and several small pottery pots. After gathering sunlight to accelerate the evaporation of moisture, Suyun placed them into the kiln filled with firewood, amidst the tribesmen's anxious gazes. He lit the flames, and the fire roared. At this rate, they should be ready by the afternoon, Suyun estimated to himself. Soon, time flew by, and it was around 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Under the blazing sun, a couple hundred tribesmen, having heard the story, gathered around the kiln. Suyun, looking at the kiln fire that had been extinguished for some time, waved his hand, sending a beam of white light into the kiln. This time, unlike before, there were not only a dozen or so pottery bowls inside, but also 3 small pottery pots. The white light shook off the dust, and the pottery items were placed on the ground. Amidst the tense and expectant gazes of the crowd, the white light gradually dissipated, revealing a pile of items inside. Thank you for the 999 reading points. Thank you. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.